Kenmore City Council is now in session. Hand it over to our facilitator, Mr. Michael Pendleton.
Thank you. Wow, 2023. It's good to see everyone. Hope you had a good holiday season. Tonight, we're going to do what's loosely been defined as a mini retreat. We've had discussions for the first of the year on topics. Those are reflected in the agenda. The time on this retreat, this mini retreat being 4 hours, certainly has constrained the number of topics. But I trust that everybody can see the things that are important to them. We'll do our best. 5:30 to 9:30 is our adjournment time. We work really hard to get there. We've worked together many times, so we understand our ground rules. I think that a couple that are really important tonight, obviously, will be to be as efficient in our conversation as possible, and as you always are, so it'll be very helpful. I think with that, let's begin, unless there's any other comments before we start. Okay. At this point, I'd turn it over to Rob, your city manager, to start the conversation under visual work plans and docket items.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for coming tonight and carving out so much of a weekend evening for this. It's really important work, and really glad that we have this time to check in with each other and talk about how the year is going to go. And as you saw in the budget that you adopted, there's lots of important work in there. And then in even more detail and presented in a slightly different way is what I call the visual work plans. And those are in your 3-ring binders and also on the agenda as well. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's these here. And most of them are colored yellow, orange, and green. And those 3 colors mean different things. Yellow is kind of a more steady ongoing workload. Orange is heavier workload, and green is heavy workload. And we could spend all 4 hours going through just these work plans, but I wanted you to have them just so you could appreciate them from a context standpoint and just realize, if you didn't already, which you probably did, but just really understanding how much is on everybody's plates and what a team effort this really is. So I'm not going to spend time going through these. I just wanted to call your attention to them. But if you did have any questions about any of them, feel free to ask. Also included in your packet here up front is the Planning Commission docket, and has its own tab. That's going to be discussed in more detail on Monday night at the January 23rd City Council meeting, and that's already uploaded to the agenda. But again, I thought it would be good to have it in this packet for tonight for context purposes. And it's not just the Planning Commission work program, it's also other code amendments that are going to fall to other departments, such as Public Works and Development Services. So if there aren't any questions, I will turn it back over to Michael.
Any questions? Okay, very good. Let's move right into our next item, which is diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And Shannon is with us virtually.
Shannon, you're on mute.
There we go. Leonora, do you have the slide deck?
No, I don't have a slide deck, but I actually could go over this very quickly if you'd like.
We have the DEI strategic plan memo, I believe.
Yes.
Okay, because that gives the timeline. I don't think you need to pull it up, but what we can do is kind of go over what we have on the agenda, and then we can answer any questions that they may have regarding the plan development schedule. But so what I'll do is I'll talk about the strategic plan development scheduling and where we are. So right now, we have been in earnest working since the fall to collect specific strategic initiatives those strategic actions that are consistent with the DEIA policy that would allow for us to be able to operationalize some of the change that is recommended and required as part of the policy. So the first thing that we had done was to go about the process of identifying current DEI strategies across every city department to be able to identify those things that are currently in place and those things that that are required to comply with both local, state, and federal law in terms of accessibility, transparency, communication, website accessibility, information accessibility. From there, we looked at the recommendations from the assessment process and wanted to identify strategic initiatives based on recommendations that might be implemented or operationalized in order to increase accessibility and improve outcomes for both staff and employees. And at this stage, we're looking at those strategies. We've compiled all of that information from every department. And we're looking now at those things that are desired strategies, but are neither staffed nor funded, so that the city manager's office and the directors can prioritize what those things may be. So based on the schedule, finish identifying and inventorying departmental core level DEI initiatives. These are DEI initiatives, again, that are currently underway within each city department. Identify additional DEIA initiatives, and then establish diversity, equity, and inclusion performance metrics to DEI strategic initiatives. That means we need to identify those data sets and that would allow for us to be able to identify both current state and success toward future state. And those data sets will depend on the initiatives themselves. Some may mean that we complete tasks like identifying language and ensuring language accessibility. Some of them might be Title VI compliance for accessibility of website and other communication modalities. Some of them may be increasing participation in meetings, gatherings, or information, or improving sentiment scores on surveys. So lots of different things. So the performance metric would depend on the strategic initiative. So we'll be doing that. We have a timeline at this point for actions to present between February 10th and July 1st. Right now, we are currently ahead of schedule. So again, we began this work to lay the groundwork for what we'd anticipate would be required as a result of the DEIA policy passage. But at this stage, we have created the framework for the 5-year roadmap for the DEIA strategy for the city of Kenmore. We're working with department leaders to fine tune that. From there, it will go to the DEIA Advisory Committee, back to directors. It will go to council, and we'll take recommendations from council and take that back to the city manager's office and directors and to the DEIA council. Our anticipation is that we'll engage the city council on at least 2, but likely 3, on 3 different opportunities for you to be able to review the DEIA policy and its framework along the way. We want to make sure that it is collaborative, that we have support and input from the council, and that we are moving in a direction that would suit both the city and the council's need. And the city, meaning the community, and the council's desire. We'll present the final DEIA strategic plan to the city council for adoption by June 12th, with the hope that we'll be able to begin implementing the 5-year DEIA strategic plan by July 1st. So that's where we are. We have a framework. We're building and fine tuning. We're reviewing and stakeholdering. And so we're moving right along. I want to stop for a second and allow for Rob and Leonora to add if they'd like to, and then for you to ask questions.
Any additions?
No, I have nothing to add.
Questions? Okay.
So I'm really excited for this. Looking at that July 1st implementation date. So it's getting more and more real. Yeah, full court, all hands on deck effort to mix my metaphors. So.
Yeah. Yep, next we can move on. I think I'm passing it to you, Rob, that we're gonna introduce talk about the Juneteenth event.
Yes, so for a couple of years now, I think we've been honoring the Juneteenth, and we've done proclamations for like 2 or 3 years now in a row. And we heard from you that in 2023, you want to honor our diversity here in the city a little bit more through our events. And so one of the things we thought of was having an event around Juneteenth, and we had some discussion about it during the budget process. And we haven't really landed on the format or the content of that event yet. So we thought tonight would be a good night to hear directly from Shannon and get her thoughts and get your thoughts as well. Shannon, do you want to give us your thoughts?
Sure, thank you. So I'll give you my insight, then I'll share with you the insight that we've gathered. Rob and I can share what the DEIA advisory committee shared, and then we'll be open for your insights and questions. Cities and states and even the federal government, after the murder of George Floyd, wanted to or had strong desires to look at opportunities to increase accessibility, talk more about celebrations, and to be more intentional about looking differently at the contributions of the Black community, African American community at every level of government and even in the private sector. One of those things that has been championed by the federal government and many others is to recognize Juneteenth as a federal, as a state, and even as a local holiday. And a lot of people learned for the first time that Juneteenth existed, why it existed, and what it hoped to celebrate. And just as a reminder, Juneteenth was a recognition for the folks that were enslaved in Galveston, Texas, in some of the furthest reaches of slaveholding territory, that they were in fact free. And African Americans across the country considered it, have called it and consider it the day of Jubilee, the day of true freedom, and to celebrate the freedom of those people who are now considered formerly enslaved. And so Black communities across the country, and especially in the South, have always celebrated Juneteenth. I remember very fondly celebrating Juneteenth, and it was always an event celebrated within the African American community, but it was certainly not something that only African Americans were expected to participate and attend. It was an event where all of the community came together to celebrate. People of every race and age and color and creed would come together, generally in Black communities, and have barbecues and cookouts and festivals and carnivals and music, but it was to celebrate the freedom of Black people. And what I've shared with Rob is that when I read the proclamations, when I read the council's desires around celebrating Juneteenth, and he said that there was a question of whether or not it should be a multicultural event, that you should celebrate other people, other cultures, other communities during this time, I wanted to know more about what that meant and what that looked like. But I'll tell you, something that is, has always been the fear of many African Americans is that when something happens, that there is a recognition of the pain or joy or successes or contributions of Black folks, there is always a desire to then open that up to include others, so that now it's not a focus on those contributions, celebrations, and worth or value of the Black community, African American community. Then it becomes something for everybody. Then it becomes something that you don't talk about and celebrate Black folks at all. Even when I looked at what is happening, for example, in the state of Florida today, Governor DeSantis decided that there was no educational value, and it would not be lawful to have an AP African-American history class. So now there's a desire in some corners of the country to continue to move in the direction to find ways to not celebrate Black people. So African-Americans have always been very sensitive to being erased, to being silenced, and to not having activities, especially ones that are dedicated to Black folks, to have them become something that is an all lives matter. And what I've told Rob is that you can't have had 2 years worth of proclamations talking about the importance of celebrating Black liberation and Black freedom, and then to create an event where now you're celebrating all communities. And I'm not going to say that there isn't worth and value in celebrating the rich diversity of the city of Kenmore, but you cannot look at the 4th of July and say we're celebrating this nation's independence and say, well, you know what, Canada's our friend, and let's celebrate Canada too. Well, we can't leave Mexico out because they're also part of North America. Now I think that we should celebrate their independence too. So now the 4th of July is just everybody's independence, because everybody matters. And then all of a sudden, the thing that you designed and created to celebrate a very specific sacred event focuses less on those communities and the reason that you've identified to celebrate it. And then you experience again what has been more than 400 years of silence and erasure. And so my recommendation is that you move ahead with why you decided to recognize, honor, and celebrate that, and to look at the 25th anniversary in August of the city of Kenmore's founding, and celebrate all of the richness and diversity of all of the community at that event. We talked to the DEIA advisory committee and asked them just for their thoughts. And I believe it would be a fair representation, and Rob, keep me honest, but I think it's a fair representation to say that they were in unanimous agreement that that the city of Kenmore should continue to stay the course and focus on celebrating an event that was designed with a very specific goal and purpose, and to look at August as an opportunity to celebrate all of the many people that represent the diversity of the city of Kenmore. So I'll pivot to Rob, let him add his own insight, and Leonora, and we can take questions.
Thanks, Shannon, for that insight. That's really helpful. And yeah, I think this is probably about the 3rd time I've heard it from you. Initially a month or 2 ago, and then 2 nights ago at the DEI committee meeting, and then tonight. And so I really appreciate your thoughts on that, and they make a lot of sense. And we actually have one of our DEI task force members in the audience tonight. And this is Lily Bishop. So thank you, Lily, for coming. Sorry to put you on the spot. But yeah, so it was a really productive DEIA committee meeting 2 nights ago. They also looked over the strategic plan schedule and everything. So, but yeah, that I think what your description of their the committee's thoughts, I think, is what I heard as well. But there's a couple more people to keep me honest if there's other thoughts or differences.
Okay. Karina.
Thank you. You know, I really appreciate your guidance, Ms. Kelly Ray. I appreciate the work we're all doing together. I think when we had the discussion of a Juneteenth event, when I went back to review that, I heard 2 different types of conversations taking place, one about Juneteenth and one about desire for multicultural events, and the way I perceived that. So I absolutely can envision an amazing event surrounded around and steeped in Black history and culture and arts and music, and invite people in to that. That's part of our way of creating a more welcoming space in our community, and also learning more and fostering that learning space. I do want to see us move beyond just a single event to other events that are multicultural events. The way I was trained in multicultural counseling is that when you have just one event or just one statement, you can fall into the gap in the error of tokenism. And I would want to make sure that we are actually committed to the efforts of having other events, moving beyond our words to our actions, working together, partnering with our stakeholders, partners, and community in the way that helps propel Kenmore forward. And I'm just very excited about that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember File.
Yeah, I'd like Shannon to respond to that concern that Councilmember File raised about tokenism. Can you give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think that the chances are more likely for people to feel like Juneteenth for the city of Kenmore represented an act of tokenism if we celebrated it through what has been its true intention for 2 or 3 years, and then to move beyond it and to feel like, okay, now let's go on and let's expand that and have it be have this be a day that it's not. I think that, tokenism is as tokenism does. And I think that right now for the city of Kenmore, it's been very clear. It's been etched in policy. It's been etched as the recognition of holiday. It's been etched in proclamations and consistent support, even with the example of Councilmember File's words just now, that there is it feels to me to be a very clear desire to continue to honor, recognize, and celebrate that event for what it is. I think that you only run into tokenism to take an opportunity and to make a big deal of it and then to move on, because then it feels like, okay, we talked about them for a while and now it's time to move on. We wouldn't imagine to look at Memorial Day or or Indigenous Peoples Day or the or Pride Month. Imagine an event where we talked about Pride Month and then we get to 2024 and say, okay, we've talked about that enough, let's move on. Then you have acts of tokenism. But, I always tell people that the celebration of diversity in the community is not to do less. The idea is that you do more. So I think the Councilmember File is spot on, that you continue to celebrate Juneteenth, and then you look for every opportunity for everybody to see themselves and be seen and heard in the community. So if that means multicultural festivals and looking to include, every voice and every person as you celebrate different parts of the community, I would hate to see, us stop talking about Pride. I'd hate to see us talking about Juneteenth and Mexican heritage and Native heritage and Russian heritage and First Nation peoples, community and contributions. I think that there's, the goal of diversity is to not look for ways to figure out how can we, let's not celebrate anybody if we can't celebrate everybody. Let's just celebrate everybody. So that's just my feeling of that.
Okay, Deborah?
Well, yeah, I am on. I think Shannon actually said a lot of what I was going to say. So that, I wholeheartedly am okay with the Juneteenth idea, but I do want it to be in the context of what Councilmember File said as well, which is that we really kind of dig in and figure out what are meaningful events and activities or recognition for the other significant groups in our community. So I don't want this to be the end of that. I want it to be the beginning. And I guess I hope that turns up in the DEI plan.
Okay, other questions? Karina?
Not a question, but a statement. I think it's really important that not only do we provide the space and help support the event, but have a presence as a city. It's easy to become a partner and a silent partner, but it's important to have a presence. So I would want to see a Kenmore booth and maybe some of our information about DEI and whatever other support services that might be available. I think that's important to community. It's also important to how we appear in our community by partnering together and being involved enough, caring enough to show up, not just providing the space. And I think that sends an important message to our community. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions before we move to the next item?
One last thought is we do plan to celebrate our city's diversity at the 25th anniversary celebration in August. So we'll have some more events around that event. So.
Okay.
And if I can add just quickly, I happen to be in Milwaukee, Wisconsin right now on Family Matters, but I wanted to share that, you know, as I've grown up in this community in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, you know, Milwaukee is considered one of by the Office of Management and Budget categorizes Milwaukee as hyper segregated. If you tell me what zip code you live in, I know what color pigment your skin is and your ethnic background. And it's not a good thing. It's one of the it was probably the driving reason that I relocated to Washington State and left Wisconsin. But you know, Milwaukee's called a great place on a great lake. It was called a great place on a great lake. And one of the things that I loved most about this community, about the spirit of the community, and to talk about the celebration of difference, even in the 70s when I was growing up, there's festivals every year, every summer that still exist today, decades later. Festa Italiana, German Fest, African American Festival, Irish Fest, Mexican Fiesta, Indian Summer Festival, Pride Fest, Arts Fest. That city, that community found ways to have 3 and 4 day celebrations in the summer on the lakefront festival grounds to bring vendors and artists and musicians and all of these folks together. Polish Fest, to celebrate culture, to celebrate community, and to expose all of the city to the richness of the diversity of the communities. So it's absolutely possible to do it, and people do it across the country all the time. And I think that at the multicultural festivals that we went to, that I could see girls with the curly blonde wigs with Irish in Irish traditional dress doing Irish dances to Irish music and Polish music and dance. I think that, you know, one of the things that has really informed my life and my values and my love of diversity and difference and celebrating community across difference was because I lived in a city that found ways to celebrate everybody. Even though we all lived in different enclaves across the community, we would all still come together. I mean, there's Greek festival. There was a festival that's called Bastille Days, where we celebrated French culture. In one of the most segregated cities in this country, we still found a way to celebrate our differences. And then we use those as opportunities to come together. And I can't wait for Kenmore to continue to move in that direction, to celebrate the richness of the diversity of its community in that way.
Okay, thank you. That was great. David.
Councilmember Baker, your microphone.
Sitting here listening to these comments and that about Juneteenth, I'm hearing a lot, certainly about African American slavery that unquestionably took place in the South and somewhat in the Midwest. But we are totally losing sight of the slavery that happened here on the West Coast. And I'm talking about the Chinese that were brought over here to work the railroads in the early 1800s. And they're being totally forgotten about. And also the Japanese that lost their homes and lost their land in the 1940s was taken away from them. And fine, we can talk about Juneteenth and we can talk about the end of slavery. But let's realize there's other large numbers of people in our communities that were also slaves, and we have totally forgotten about them. So that's my observation. Thank you.
Okay. Any other observations or questions before we move to the next item? Joe?
The light's not going on. Is it on? Okay, thanks. I appreciate Councilmember Baker's statements. I would have a difference with, recognizing that in terms of actual slavery, I think that's a condition that African Americans specifically were subject to. I think it's important to honor and or to try to dishonor the oppression that the white majority perpetrated upon them, and to recognize the definition, I think, for what it is. And at the same time, I think I don't see any inconsistency between specifically celebrating Juneteenth, which I think is critical. It's important in our national identity and some form of reckoning, I think. I think we can see that we're moving forward somewhat, at least. And at the same time, I don't see an inconsistency with utilizing or looking at in the future or recognizing other very specific events like the West Coast evacuations, forced evacuations, and internment camps for the Japanese, and the Chinese, the anti-Chinese exclusion acts of the 1880s. So I support absolutely Juneteenth as a specific celebration. I think that's absolutely right. And I think we can also look to the other important historical issues that have happened as well. And, look forward with that as an eye to recognizing history, because it's such a cliche, right? But only by recognizing history are we going to learn from it and do better.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments before we go to the next item? Karina?
I just want to thank both Councilmember Marshall and Baker for their comments. I think this is exactly what Councilmember Shrebnick and I have also expressed, is we need to do more. And I don't know that there's an overlooking of these issues, but we are finally, the Kenmore Council is finally in a space together with the city to greater recognize the importance of the intersectionality and diversity of our community. And of course, the role, history has played both in the Puget Sound region and in the great numbers of our community. We know we have a very large Asian community, right? We have a very diverse community. I want to see more celebration, more recognition. And I also don't want to feel pressure about the number of proclamations we have to recognize the importance of history, of events, and our role we have to support our community. It may seem like we're doing a lot of proclamations or support issues, but it's important to not overlook and just because it's a large number. I think it's important that we stand together in partnership with our community, because when we look past, they do feel left out. And I don't think that's a message we want to share. So thank you.
David?
Councilmember Baker, your microphone.
Noticing a change here, DEI and DEIA. A is for the accessibility, but can somebody define the accessibility a little bit more for me? What accessibility are we referring to?
Accessibility would imply the ability to connect with, access, communicate, be a part of, and engage in a way that is meaningful and robust for all of the members of the community. So to give an example of accessibility for the city of Kenmore, that would imply that the city of Kenmore would provide for services in the home language of people so that they are able to engage with and utilize the full services of city government. Accessibility might mean the right of way of and the thoroughfare or right of way of people that are disabled to be able to have access to free use of, or to be able to leverage resources and public spaces made available by the city. Accessibility may mean providing for equal opportunity for all people seeking employment. So those are some examples. I hope that make it clear what is meant by accessibility.
Yes, thank
Increasing-
you. I was just wanting to make sure that accessibility also referred to our disabled community and our senior community that are having
Yep.
issues with mobility. Thank you.
Yep, it is to create, it is to allow access and improve opportunities for all people.
Okay, any other comments or questions? All right, we have one additional item, the municipal index or equality index. Are you going to talk about that, Shannon? Or
Rob, did you want to introduce that?
The council member file asked for that to be discussed.
Great, thank you. So the Human Rights campaign has something called the Municipality Equality Index. And it's a way of scoring a city and recognizing cities that are doing outstanding and amazing work in the scope of diversity, equity, and inclusion, accessibility. I had the opportunity to meet the director of the Human Rights Campaign at the National League of Cities event this last winter and or into fall. And he said, Kenmore's doing the work. You're already there. They automatically score cities that are over 50,000 persons, but smaller cities like ours, medium-sized cities, you have to submit the work. It's simple enough that even the Kansas City, Missouri submitted their work during the convention and had, both the recognition as a city, a national response, nationally recognized, as well as celebrated together with their city and their state. So it's an exciting thing. It's good for cities in the way that it attracts people to move to your community, creates greater interest in and support into your community for buy-in, as well as for business, identification of a great place to be and to start your business. So I think this is worthwhile. Probably take about 45 minutes of work of gathering the policies we already have, the identifiers, and there are some flex points, but there's maybe 5 cities in the state of Washington, Bellevue, I think it's Tacoma, Seattle, and another are already identified on this list. I think it's a good opportunity for Kenmore. It's also good to show our leadership and our commitment to the work, and hopefully continue that on and help encourage other cities to participate as well.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to piggyback Councilmember File in support of your statement of position. The Human Rights Campaign, specifically this index, would give the city of Kenmore an opportunity to be able to share with an advocacy organization the efforts that are in place and those things that will be executed, to really give you an opportunity to be designated one of those great places in America where something exists. And for the Human Rights Campaign, just to give you an example, some of those things that they score. Non-discrimination laws. This category evaluates whether discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity is prohibited by the city, county, or state in areas of employment, housing, and public accommodations. And they look, again, employment, housing, and public accommodations separately under municipality as an employer, non-discrimination in city employment, transgender inclusive healthcare benefits, city contractor non-discrimination ordinance, and inclusive workplace. When I look at all of the areas of municipal services, does the city of Kenmore assess, this section assesses the efforts of the city to ensure LGBTQ+ residents are included in city services and programs. And so you look at youth bullying prevention policy, city provides services to the LGBTQ youth and homelessness and so on. They also look at law enforcement and leadership on LGBTQ+ equality. These are all things that you're already doing. And in the last year and over the course of the next year, you're even strengthening. So this is merely an opportunity to report what you do and to be recognized across the country for your efforts.
Karina.
And just to wrap that up, as a municipality that is recognized, it's a great thing to add to those grant applications. You know, it's an item to check on the box to show that we are doing the work and we're recognized for that work. I think it's a great opportunity that we shouldn't pass up. There is also a press kit that comes with that if once they score the city, and you can participate in a press release. They share that moment with the city, and you can invite whoever you like to invite. I think somebody from King County would appreciate it. But you know, we couldn't do this work without all of you. We couldn't do this work without each other and the shoulders, standing on the shoulders of past councils. But we've done a lot of great work this last 4 years that further our success on this work route. So I highly recommend it. I look forward to your comments and feedback.
Deborah.
Just a quick one. This looks really interesting. It's a new initiative. I would want to hear what kind of staff time it's going to require. Not that that would be a stopper, but we need to evaluate that in the context of every kind of initiative that we introduce.
Angela, is your hand up? No, Nigel?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's something definitely worth looking at. I think though, based on the calendar that we were given for actually getting our DEIA strategic plan, that it might make more sense to do a little bit later when we have, I don't know, a better opportunity to score a little bit higher by actually having some of these things in place. Just my thoughts.
Angela?
I was actually going to, does this sound like that's working? I was actually going to suggest that, okay. Michael's looking at me like he can't hear me, but that maybe it be part of the DEI plan, like as departments are looking at their work, like maybe this is one of the things that they recommend. I think it's a good idea.
I don't think your mic is on.
It is on. Can you hear me, Ken?
Okay, other comments? Karina?
I'll just wrap that up. So you're looking about 45 minutes of staff time. And the press kit release has all the information. So all you have to do is kind of plug and play your information into it. So you're really looking at under an hour of staff time. And that's usually, you know, like HR has a piece of that. I'm sure that any one of us would be willing to comb through policies and plug that into part of the record or recommendation to help decrease the amount of time. But I'm fine if we need to put that into the box of the DEI task force work and where they might be able to take that on and how that works. I don't want to overestimate Kelly Ray's time and commitment and our budget threshold. So this is pretty much of a low cost item, you know. Yeah.
Angela?
Just to clarify, I actually didn't mean to ask the advisor or the task force to do it. What I was thinking is that it might fit in with some of the DEIA initiatives that departments are doing, because it sounds like it might relate to like HR policy or other policies that we have existing. It seems like it might be a natural fit that at some point it might be one of their either current or near-term or long-term initiatives that they would naturally address. So for staff, not the advisory committee.
Okay, any other comments? So I'm hearing general interest and approval and looking at least look into what this is. The hesitation, which is my word, not necessarily yours, is more to understand a bit more what the impacts on staff would be, the best way to fit that in, and what the best delivery mechanism would be. And so with that, generally, when you have these kind of conversations, where that leads is to give staff an opportunity to take a look at what that means, give you a sense of that and where it might be best located from a recommendation perspective. That's typically how you've handled these things in the past, but is that somewhat consistent with what your feelings and thoughts are at this time? Okay. Shannon, does that work for you?
Yes, yep.
Rob? Okay, perfect, great. All right, anything else on DEI? Okay. Thank you, Shannon, so much.
Thank you.
Good luck in Milwaukee, so
Thank you so much.
you bet.
I look forward to seeing everybody when I'm back.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Moving to the next item. These are updates and there's several bullets under these. I'm not quite sure who's going to start. Rob, are you going to kick that off or it's or somebody? Review of council priorities, regional, so forth.
On review of council priorities, I think one or two of you asked for this and so you'll see the council priorities in your 3-ring binder and also on the agenda. So I don't know, Michael, I don't know if you remember who asked for that. Yeah, that's coming up. All right, well, if there aren't any comments on council priorities.
Well, there are updates on goals. I think Melanie and Angela were interested just in a general sense of this opportunity just to see where you were on these things, but those folks have mentioned it back in November. Remember, we were ways back we did, but any more on that?
I don't.
Rena.
When I'm looking at this agenda, some has changed. I know we have respond to the pandemic, and for some of our community, I think they see the pandemic as something that's past and gone. But for municipalities, we are still continuing that work, and that's connected to much of the support structures in place to uplift our community. And so I'm happy that it's on this list, those grants, those support, those emergency funding opportunities to help with housing, support services, housing and human services, behavioral health, mental health, business, let alone infrastructure and growth are all critical to municipalities. So I'm happy that we're continuing on. And I just want to make sure the community could hear this discussion and understand that's why it's still there.
Okay, great. Any other comments? The priorities are listed here. You know what they are. I'm assuming this is a check-in so that if you have questions in any of these specific areas, you can certainly ask them now. But if not, we can certainly move on. There's no need to linger if we don't need to. Okay, let's move to regional aquatic center update.
Debbie Bett.
Thank you. So you may recall that the city applied for and received 2 grants one in partnership with the City of Kirkland and another one in partnership with the City of Lake Forest Park and Shoreline. So a total of $200,000 to look at a feasibility study for an aquatic center. And we're hoping to have an RFP issued by the end of this month to get a consultant on board. And that process will probably take through the end of the year. That's my update.
Questions? Deborah and then Joe.
I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. So are they going to look for, those are two different grants for two different regions. Are they looking at two different potential siting prioritizations, or is it like one? I mean, I guess I'm just needing a little clarity on that.
Well, there were two separate grants, and so I think we have to sort of look at them as two separate regions, but there are sort of commonalities across all. So looking at multiple sites, yes.
Okay, Joe?
Did we ask Lake Forest Park at all? Were they interested? I can't remember.
They're part of the grant, yes.
Okay. Other questions or discussion on the center? Angela?
I think I wanted to clarify that I heard it, what your update was. So you said there are two different feasibility studies going on, but then,
There's one feasibility study going on to look at siting regional aquatic facilities in partnership, one with the City of Kirkland and another one in partnership with Lake Forest Park and Shoreline. So there will be multiple sites examined, and we have to kind of respect that because we had two grants, we have to sort of look in those regional areas. And Kenmore is sort of the common denominator across both grants. So where those sites will end up sort of needs to sort of take a look at sort of where the population is distributed, accessibility, and some other things that would make sense for siting one or more facilities to serve those jurisdictions.
okay, and then what was the RFP for?
The RFP is for a consultant to conduct that feasibility analysis.
Okay, thank you.
David?
Clarification, if possible.
Councilmember.
What are the potential sightings at this point?
What?
Potential, not definite.
In Kenmore, you mean?
Oh, I'm just
Councilman-
talking in general for this grant money. What are the potential sightings?
Well, that's what will come out of the feasibility study. So that will be the results to look at what the potential sites are.
So there's no sites coming up right now, no names, no cities, no nothing as far as any potential sites.
Several of those cities have done prior studies of sightings, so I'm sure that will be part of the background information of prior studies completed by the jurisdictions and what sites were looked at. So yes.
All right, let me try again. Since we're the ones that got the money to study the site, the potential sites for the pool, is Kenmore seriously being considered for placement of the pool?
Yes, we are one of the jurisdictions, so the answer is yes. Are there any feasible sites in Kenmore? That will be determined at the results of the feasibility study.
Okay, so
It's no, there are no,
feasible sites
there are
has
no
no-
predetermined sites, if that's the question you're asking me.
okay, so feasible sites in Kenmore has not been determined yet.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Our city clerk has her hand up.
Oh, Michelle.
Can I just ask staff who have the wireless mics to just hold it up so that people on Zoom can hear better? There's like an echo because it's further away. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on the Aquatic Center and the work going on with that? Okay. All right.
And Debbie has the next two items as well.
Why, so on, is that better, Michelle? Thank you. I feel like I should start singing or something, but I won't. So the bench update. So the bench is the property on the south side of SR 522, and that's where the city purchased last year the Cozy Inn, former Cozy Inn property. And if you also recall, the city hired a consultant to take a strategic look at all those bench properties. There are 12 parcels, and to come up with a recommendation. So the consultant's work is ongoing, and the results will be presented to council in March. And in March, then we'll be asking for council direction about what to do with the Cozy Inn property. Hold on to it, sell it, take a look at what the consultant's recommendations are. I think at the very least that staff would be recommending that that building is demolished, and we would be looking at a demolition package with the homes that are on the public works site. So that is sort of a preview. We're not asking for any direction this evening.
Questions, comments? Karina?
I could support the site being utilized for beautification or affordable housing. With affordable housing, there's a lot of cleanup grants that partner with that, and that's a site that could utilize that really well. You know, being right off of high routes of transportation, affordable housing is a great opportunity space. It could even be mixed use with business on the lower half. I think this is a great opportunity for growth in Kenmore, but we also have that beautiful view that has been blocked. So I would like to create some flexibility for what might come to this space. But I do think for public safety purposes that removing the structure as it is now is really important.
Other comments or questions? Nigel?
Yeah, I mean, I'm in favor of demolishing it and selling it personally. I don't think we should have purchased it in the first place. So I'm fine returning it to the private market and frankly, adding it back to our property tax rolls, because when we purchase property, we're still collecting the same amount of property tax over the entire city. It just gets distributed amongst the remaining private property. So return that to the private market. I'm not saying it's going to lower anybody's property tax in any meaningful way, but it adds it back to that pool. And I think we might see something useful come out of that. I'm not sure.
Deborah?
I just want to clarify what we're doing here tonight with this is an update, not providing direction. Is that clear, right? Is that
That's
correct?
the intent, yes. No direction tonight. We would be looking for direction in March. We'll have the consultant presentation about his strategic recommendation, and at that point, we would be looking for council direction on what to do with the property in the short or long term.
Yeah, and I'm certainly looking forward to that report. The entire intention of purchasing that property was to understand what could be done in that area, and we don't know that yet. So I think that would impact, well, I mean, it would certainly impact the decision that we make. So I think that would be pretty important.
David?
Yes, I'm in complete agreement with the mayor. I don't think we should ever bought it. And I think the sooner we can get it on the market, the better.
Other comments or questions? Okay. Kenmore Village, Phase 2, downtown next steps. Debbie?
Well, in partnership with Stephanie, we drafted a memo to give you an update on what's going on downtown development next steps. Again, we have the consultant, who's actually the same consultant, has work underway to take a look at what the next steps would be. And in particular, taking a look at options for the city-owned post office and neighboring properties. So this is property that is adjacent to what was known as the Kenmore Village development, the 10 acres that the city consolidated and then worked with a developer to develop. So this is sort of a next step about what are some of the next steps, or what are some things the city could do to stimulate, I guess, further redevelopment. What would that redevelopment look like? So that again is what the consultant will be taking a look at. He will be attending the meeting in March to give you his results. And at that time, there's an opportunity for council to ask questions and give some direction on next steps. That's the update I have.
Comments or questions? Okay. Well, well, thank you for everyone. We're moving through the agenda very quickly, which I don't want to jinx it because I'm obviously very happy that we're able to do something like that. We were set to take a break, but we're only an hour into it. So happy to break us for quickly if you need a break. Would you like a quick break? Okay, let's take a quick break and then we'll come right back and get back at it. Thank you. Okay, let's come back to the table and start up again, please. The next item on the agenda is titled Middle Housing, a topic you've been working on for a while. And if I recall, Joe, you were interested in having this on the agenda. There's others that have also expressed an interest. So maybe I'll just kind of nod your direction and have you start us off with your thoughts on it, if you would,
Yeah.
please. Thank you.
So I think I was thinking more of right now, at least a reminder of the update as to what the process is going to be or the timeline for when we come back. That would be awesome. Looking at Ms. Bent.
Right back at you. We'll be coming to council on February 27th and giving you an update on the staff report. If you remember, the city received a Department of Commerce grant, and part of that grant is public engagement, doing a racial equity analysis and looking at proposed codes. So we have a consultant on board. We'll give you an update on what that public engagement process will look like, and we're trying to figure that out in light of legislation which is pending. And who knows, that the state might tell us things that we will have to do for missing middle housing. We won't know that till the end of April. We have to expend the grant money by the end of June. So it's a little bit tricky to figure out the logistics, but we're working on it. So more to come when we give you that report in February.
Okay, other comments or discussion, Karina?
Yeah, I really appreciate that this is coming back for some attention here soon, and that there's a great plan of action to work the parts and pieces out. I know we've had updates both from police and fire, but I do know that when it comes to our community and bringing them together with us, sometimes it's best to have those statements come from fire and police, like our fire chief, our police chief. That authoritarian voice is helpful in this space. I think they both have ideas of how to support this work. And I do like the idea of partnering together with our community in those smaller groups that has been discussed prior. But I just wanted to add those thoughts and close the door on that.
Okay. Questions or other comments on Deborah?
Thanks, Debbie, for the briefing. And I think we may be going to talk about this either next Monday or at another time soon. But in terms of community engagement, like Councilmember Fowle said, I feel like even though we're not hearing about what the state is going to embark on until a little bit later, there might be opportunities for doing community workshops or charrettes around the different forms that missing middle housing might take, with more visuals, really kind of inviting people in to talk about them in more informal ways. Just a thought.
Yes, so our consultant, who is a public engagement professional, is going to kind of give us what the best way to get that engagement is. I will just have to kind of remind council that when we were doing the Missing Middle Housing Project, we were in the middle of a pandemic. It was hard to do any kind of public in-person meetings, and we did some creative outreach approaches. It's a different time now, and that will probably give us more flexibility to have more in-person opportunities. But again, we'll describe that a little bit more in February.
Other questions or comments? Okay. We'll move on then. Next item is council relations, city council meetings. Where's the fun? June retreat. You want to start us off on this? Well, I can. So in our conversations leading up to this retreat and the agenda and so on, and actually ironically, the night you had a big community meeting, I was talking with Rob about putting things together, and then subsequently learned from you that process around, I think, middle housing was intense. And a couple of you in the interviews setting up this retreat were concerned that perhaps that might have strained council relations or otherwise put pressure on you in either ways you weren't accustomed to or ways that you felt you'd like to address. So that topic was identified for discussion here this evening. So I'll just be the person that put that out there. You don't have to talk about it, of course, if you're not comfortable with that, but I think that was the motivation for the topic. So what say ye? Nigel?
I mean, I would say that, well, that might have been one of the more contentious topics we've had as a council. I think the council relations part of that actually has gone quite well. Nobody got, I mean, I'm actually proud of all my colleagues. Nothing got personal between council members, and we kept our arguments to the issues at hand. And so I think on that level, I'm actually really happy with how the council handled things.
Okay, great. David?
Councilmember Baker.
It was a number of years ago that we as a council came out and directly said this. It was one, because of our interest in the children of our community. It was an effort, part of Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign, to get kids out of the house, out from behind the computer screen, the television screen, and outside doing something. And we always looked at where's the fun as providing opportunities for kids and giving some of the money back to the community in the form of parks, recreation opportunities, and a number of different things. I think that's part of where the park up in the, not Up Lake neighborhood, but up on the hill. Yeah, the summit. That's where the park from the summit came from. That actually started when the city manager, Fred Newenschwander, was here. And it grew from a $30,000 park to close to $350,000 park. That's where the ideas came from for Rhododendron Park. That's where the ideas came from for the ball fields at Morelands. And I think also part of it was the park and walkways and waterways to try to give more outdoor opportunities to the youth and families of our community. And that's also got to do with the Dragon Boat program and the canoe program. They have given out scholarships to Mary's Place, to the kids there. They have given out canoe opportunities and paddleboard opportunities to the kids at Mary's Place. It's just part of the city trying to make sure the youngest generations and families in our community have lots of outdoor activities to do.
So before I want to hold that, I want to make sure we exhausted any conversation. So I want to hold what you said, exhausted any more conversation just around the missile middle conversation. So I want to make sure we're ready to move to that next bullet before we do. So I don't want to hold those thoughts. Deborah, I think I saw your hand, and then Melanie.
Okay.
So I'm going to hold those.
Now I think I heard you say missing middle, but I think, aren't we on the council relations? Yeah, okay.
Right, around
Yeah,
that.
so on the council relations, I would concur with the mayor that I thought, we ultimately came out of that in not too bad a shape, given how challenging it was. We did kick the can down the road a little bit, and it is nice to kind of come out with some decisions, but I understand why we didn't. I think one of the things that, I think somebody actually other than me put this on the agenda. I didn't. But one of the things that I want to raise is just, we've got some challenging issues that we're working on. Missing middle is one of them. We've got, climate action, and that's bumping up against that, and human services are bumping up against budget issues, which we're grappling with. We've got DEIA issues. They're all very, very good issues to be grappling with, but some of them have challenges and some of them are sensitive. And I guess what I'd like to say is that I hope that we can keep in mind that what we are doing is setting policy, and that our discussions are policy making, that we're all doing our best, sort of assuming best intentions. I think it's a little bit of a catchphrase, but I think it's real, particularly as we embark on some of these discussions a bit more. And that, if you have a difference of opinion with somebody, it isn't because that person has a moral failing. It's that they have a different opinion, period. If we can hold that with each other, I think that'll be helpful. Obviously, it'd be lovely if everybody held that when they talk to us. But I understand why that doesn't always happen. But if we can hold that with each other, I think that'll be helpful. And I did put the where's the fun. So when we're ready to get to that, I'd be happy to introduce that.
Okay, thank you, Melanie. Then David, then Karina.
I've been a little quiet tonight, so excuse my gravelly voice. Yeah, I think we made it through missing middle. I think we've had, my perspective is maybe a little different. I thought there were some histrionics, I think might be the word, or some use of language that did feel pointed or judgmental. And I think it's important for us to be mindful that we are all working together. And it is possible to see things from a very different perspective and all be really working towards the same goal. And I know that we all are concerned about housing and the environment and the critical issues of our time. I just would encourage that we, it was very heated. I felt the most heated I'd experienced here. And so for us to be respectful of each other and knowing that we're all pointing in the same direction for the city of Kenmore is incredibly important for us to be mindful of. And yeah, I don't think I need to go much further than that, but I personally thought that there were times that the line was crossed during that conversation, and we made it through, and I'm thankful for that.
Okay, David, and then Karina.
Yeah, I think that was a big part of it, was we have different thoughts as a council. And you vote and you move on. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. And that's part of where's the fun, is that you remain good friends, you vote what you feel is right, and you forget about it. You know, what happens. Everybody does not have the same ideas. We all have different ways to get to the same goal. So anyway.
Okay, thank you, Karina.
Thank you. I thought this was an interesting topic to come onto our agenda, but I am glad you brought it up, Melanie O'Kane, Councilmember O'Kane. So, I'm a little surprised because I think that when we're talking about like at least what was happening with missing middle, I think there was a lot of heat that came with community and pressure sense, but our conversation with our comments are directed to staff. And so we don't have inner discussions to each other. We might support statements of one council member or another to show a support and a pathway. But I can't, maybe there is, some complexity around the issue. So, the good news is that we are all in the right place, and we appreciate each other's differences of opinion, and our council rules describe, our approaches. And if there were any personal attacks, I didn't see any, and I'm sure our mayor would call that out. But I know even after meetings, personally, I feel comfortable to call any one of my fellow colleagues and ask questions or approach. So I think we're very fortunate to have a really good working team. And the beauty of that is there's a lot of difference you see that is also recognized within the community who elected us here to serve them in policy and voice. So when we're working and sharing those perspectives forward and exploring or challenging things, it's just that lens. So it's part of the job, part of the duties, but I'm glad that we can work so well together.
Okay, Nigel.
And just one thing I'd like to emphasize, and I haven't seen much of this, but and one of the things that I think we can all do, and is covered by Robert's rules and all of this, in order to work together, is to assume good intentions. And I think we're good at that. But B, don't assume the reasons why somebody is one way or the other on a topic. Don't ascribe motives to why somebody's doing something. They may just have a completely different view on it, and that's okay. And as long as we're aiming our arguments at the policy, not at each other, then we'll be good. And if anybody starts doing that and I don't gavel them, please raise a point of order with me, and we'll stop that. So, but that's something I think is really important, is that we're really arguing to the policies and not getting personal with each other as much as possible.
Okay, any other comments? So it's good to, I'm getting from this that you don't often have high intensity policy experiences like you did. And so if you're used to moving along, this is true with all groups, and then all of a sudden something happens like that, it does put pressure on your relationships. I think having this exact kind of conversation, relatively low key, looking backwards, saying, okay, we're all in, and with strong leadership, and I appreciate what Nigel just said. So I think it's very good that you've had this conversation, and you're a great policy team, one of the best I work with. So, but again, the heart of a great policy team is knowing how to disagree effectively. That's the key right there. So I've always been really proud of this team for that, for at least the years I've seen you. So any other questions before we move on to the next bullet under this, or comments? Okay. Deborah, I would appreciate you hearing your introduction. Thank you.
Sure. I mean, this kind of relates to the next bullet, which is the retreat. So this is now my second term, and so I was fortunate enough to serve pre-pandemic. And those were the halcyon days where we were able to get together and have a retreat and get to know each other, which fosters strong council relations. And so, these are inextricably linked. And I am saddened that several of us have not, are just beginning to, have that experience. And I'm excited that we're going to have more of that. But I guess in the meantime, before our June retreat, it was just sort of a question of, are there ways we can put a little more fun into our own work to strengthen our relationships and to, have that excitement back. I think of, even some of the more challenging policy decisions that we made where there were differences of opinion and we came together ultimately. I mean, there was kind of a little giddy feeling at, when we got to those junctures of, gosh, we did this and we've come out of it and we're okay. And, we made a solid policy decision. I have several examples of that, but that's somehow to kind of bring back more of the fun. And part of it is we've had very, very long meetings, and we're going to try and do better about that so that we're not completely and utterly drained. But I think, maybe there's other ways, and I would just open it up to the group if you have some thoughts other than the retreat for having more fun.
Okay, thank you, Karina.
I'm so happy this conversation is being had. Our meetings are really long and we're really packing them in, and we have very short breaks. Behavioral health wise, mental health wise, even the Department of Labor and Industries recommends a 15-minute break. 5 minutes is a bit, you can't reset. If you need to, you've been going strong for 3 hours, 3.5 hours, 2 hours, whatever, and it's complex, or you have a big item and it's an issue to the community, there's a lot of tension around it. For some, there's going to be celebration. For others, there's going to be disappointment. There's some ways to address that and also navigate it with counsel. So things we might consider is I hope we can lengthen our break a little bit so that we can come back in refreshed from a break. And also know that that helps people with different mobility issues also serving on council to be able to return back. The other thing is, I think that because the topics are so heavy and because we are workhorses and we're very dedicated, right? We all want to do a good job, get the great work done. But if we build in little breaks, not only does a reset help, but it also helps mood, and it can help change your perspective. We can look to find the humor in situations, and I encourage us to do that. I know each and every one of us actually has a pretty wicked sense of humor in all kinds of different kinds of ways. I'm sure it can be done. I think we just have to make room to celebrate each other, have fun with the complexities, and bend with the curves, because it's just a bump in the road, right? Those stressful moments, and we can create the fun. We can do it. I watch Rob do that all the time, so we can.
Other comments, Angela?
Yeah, I'm glad that Councilmember Srebnick put this on the agenda. I think it's, I think there was a much different world of like interactions when we were online, right? Very transactional when it's on Zoom or just seeing faces. And there's a formality of our meetings also that continues that as well. When we're connecting with and talking to residents and they're at a podium, just talking to us and there's no interaction, there's also like a very transactional type of relationship built. And so I think, whether we describe it as like having fun or even just bringing like food or snacks before our meetings so we can have, some time to connect before meetings, that might be a good way of doing it. We can do it during breaks. We can also just plan opportunities to interact with each other and our community in ways that are not so formal, I think. Will help us work better. I mean, I think we all know this also in our professional lives, right? Like team building is such an important part of working well together. And ultimately, we are a team working towards the same priorities. So
Okay, great. Other comments? Karina?
Sorry, I just came to it with an idea. In work departments, you often have some competition to find the fun in your work and to find the fun with each other and helping bridge relationships. And that can be everything from a competition on how many steps you've taken this week, how many parks have you visited in your community, whatever. There can be a number of things. Even our local school board has a number of, inner competitions, and they razz each other a little bit about it because they're having fun. And it does help build rapport. And so it might be something we consider doing. I'm pretty sure somebody next to me is a really good rower and probably could, kick our butt with rowing. I know Council Member or Deputy Mayor O'Kane is an amazing runner. She probably could, outpace us any day of the week. So I think there's some neat opportunities to find the fun and just the joy of our community and amongst the community we share together.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? So couple thoughts on this one, having had great fortune of working over the years with different councils that approach this topic in very different ways. Because you're busy and following on the idea of community, there are councils I've worked with who build in time and space in their festivals or what have you, where they do things somewhat like that, or they're available to do things. So the natural thing is to build something like that into your existing fund profile for the city. And I think there's many opportunities. The retreat has historically been that, at least in my brief times with you, because you've been, all of us related to each other's people. I've met many family members through that experience, had tons of fun and stories. It's been great. The one I would share something that I experienced with a council on the lake here years ago. One of the council members owned, I call it a dude ranch, but he had a ranch with horses. And this was a retreat that went Friday night, Saturday, and then we worked Saturday night and then half a day on Sunday. But the half a day on Saturday, the retreat stopped and everyone there went horseback riding together. Now I'm bringing that up, not that I'm saying, gee, go horseback riding. What I really want to tell you about is the experience that caused them to have together. That it was so much fun, so funny. People were sore, after dinner. I mean, it was just the whole thing, but it was just very unique. Another client of mine, and they use the retreat for this, and I'm not saying you should do that, but I'm just trying to point out that you need to look for the opportunities that exist. You have families and lives outside of this. So, that's the way to go. They would do the same. They go over the beach, over ocean shores. And then the Saturday, I think they work. And then from like 1:30 to 3, they do this long beach walk and they pick stuff up and then they'd come back and kind of share it and so on and then go back to work. It was simple. It was stuff that they just did. And when they were out like that, they talked about stuff, they laughed together. And essentially they put a deposit in the social bank, if you will, because they knew later on they weren't going to agree with stuff. That we were, and so they needed to see each other outside of this role. And I think COVID's really hammered us on that. We just can't see each other much anymore outside this role. So I just offer that up as something for you to think about, because here's what I worry about. You're a great policy team, and I work with a number of teams that are good. With the heavy, often not good presence of social media, hammering you day in and day out. And without any way to sustain these relationships, people are going to stop wanting to do what you do. And that's going to really be a problem for our communities as good people go, you know what, I just can't do this anymore. I'm not saying that's where you are, but it's just something to think about for. So that's my little spiel for you on that. So any other comments or thoughts, Rob?
Yeah, I really appreciate this being brought up, and council meetings can be kind of a drag sometimes. And so how do we bring the fun back into it? I think that's the main question being asked. And there's so many positive and wonderful things going on in the city, and my coworkers are often complimented for what they do. We have co-creator, Kenmore residents, our co-creators out there doing really cool things. You see those things mentioned in my weekly update, but that's more kind of an internal document. But what about shining a light on those things during council meetings? And I could do it during staff report, but by the time we get to staff report, everybody's gone home, except for us. So, I mean, I could do it during staff report, but I don't know if there's something we might do at the beginning of the meeting or something like that. So.
Joe, and then Dave.
Just occurred to me one thing that might be fun. I don't want everybody to commit to this or feel you have to or anything. Maybe I would do something, and I think we do a little bit, but sharing something really cool that you had overlooked before, in Kenmore or about Kenmore. I was just thinking of those letters most of us got from the kids at the civic class at Inglemore, and things like, one young man wrote me, he moved from Mexico. And when he found out he was going to move to near Seattle, he was so excited because there are all these lakes. He was going to be able to swim because where he lived, he wrote this. He said the lakes are polluted and you don't swim in those lakes. And he was so excited. He was moved up here. He was very happy. He thought it was a little bit cold, but he was really excited. He just sort of wrote to us or me and us, about how much he appreciated preserving the lake. So maybe I can try to think something like that is fun to relate, but also, serves the public interest with our time here in underscoring something that's important. I feel we have to serve fun, and the public, and there's no inconsistency thereof.
Okay. David, and then Karina.
I really agree with what Rob was saying. And we hear from the public, but I think there's a lot of good things in this going on in this community that we don't hear. And I think it really would be good if we allowed a couple of minutes before citizen comments or in there somewhere at the beginning of the meeting where Rob tells us about something with one of the community members. I mean, it certainly won't take more than 5 minutes or so, and I'm not looking. Well, we can use that as a discretionary time. But I think that we ought to, if the mayor is in agreement with this, I mean, there's so much bad stuff we hear that it's really good to hear some good stuff. And so I suggest at the beginning of the meeting, maybe we do something like that.
Steffi.
I love this conversation. And the other thing that I just want to highlight are the talented staff we have and so much good work happening internally. I can think right now off the top of my head of a half a dozen examples that would be fun to share in less than 5 minutes. So I think we could probably tee up some of those and have those ready. And when there's time and the agenda feels like we can make that happen, I would be happy to take the lead on that or be responsible for highlighting some stories and giving those to Rob to share.
So good, we have a number of things to keep us going for months, so that's great.
I think so. There's a lot of good work happening.
Okay, that's cool. Karina.
This is fun. I absolutely support a staff report at the beginning of a meeting, as well as great updates. It's practiced throughout the region in different governments and different types of governments. Even North Shore practices this model. And it's great in a way that it highlights what's happening, what's being done, what's important for our community to catch on to, which is important. Sometimes they might wait a few days to catch an end of a meeting and they might have already missed something, or they may have overlooked something in the mail. those verbal prompters are very helpful. So I think that's great. I support that. And I love the idea of supporting student voices. And I think it'd be really great to have a tool we could utilize of a book of student voices, Kenmore's student youth, letters they write into us. Usually you can take out the last name, that sort of thing. But it becomes a nice share also with the public, just to let them see the joys of what we're seeing. It's a fun share. It's a great way to build a partnership with community. And I see there's possibly even a role for policy and working with our community of attaching letters for sidewalks and crosswalks. You know, student youth voices are pretty inspiring, whether it's pre-K or 12th grade, you know, and our legislature and committees and the governor loves that stuff, right? And what a great way to partner together with community and find the fun in what we do and share that fun. So I like anything we can do to highlight Kenmore, to improve upon what we're doing and forecast us further forward, propelling Kenmore forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or thoughts on this? Joe?
In the interest also of brevity, I would reemphasize keeping it no more than 5 minutes, but possibly even 3 for the positive thing at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay. Deborah?
Yeah, I would second Councilmember Marshall on that. I'm thinking maybe, you know, like what's fun this week or what's cool this week, you know, one example, you know, just one, maybe 2. Just keep it real short. I mean, just something to, I don't know, get people kind of excited.
Karina?
And say it with pictures too. Community likes pictures. They can connect to it and find the fun in what we're doing. So say it with pictures.
Okay. June retreat. Not sure. Scheduling issue.
Yeah, I think there's a desire to, number one, schedule it right here and now, if you all have your calendars. And then number 2, talk about location and that sort of thing.
So the month is June, correct?
That's right.
Okay. You know how many days? Or a day, or how's that gonna go?
I know I have a senior graduated from Inglemore High School, so let's just not schedule it on that day. And it's probably good to do the retreat before school gets out, because once school gets out, people want to be gone. So I should have checked for this beforehand, but does anybody know the last day of school offhand? That's pretty easy to get. Almost there.
That's June 20th. So it says the North Shore School District calendar app.
So are you looking for a weekend day, a Saturday, or how do you want?
That's up to the council, but you know, for our annual full retreat, we usually do 2 full days, like a Friday and a Saturday. At least that's the way it used to be. One thought is, let's see. June 16th, 17th, or June 9th, 10th. Okay, want to go for the 9th and the 10th?
Works for me. I've got a thing going on that weekend.
So is that 9, 10 not good for you, Angela? Okay, how about 2, 3?
I'm gonna be out of town that weekend.
Okay, and 16, 17 is not good? Okay, right, yes, open. Well, now we're after school's out, unless you go into May. May. Your Memorial Day. 23, 24, that's the week that school is out.
Yeah, we could do that if nobody's going anywhere.
I'm going to say no because I have to serve on a federal committee that weekend.
Okay.
Is there a reason that we need to do it on the weekend? I guess, I mean, it makes it hard to take 2 days off work.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Never mind.
3rd and 1st works on my end.
Is that going to bump into the 4th in any way? Or no?
That's my concern. My family, and we don't have anything booked yet, but it's not unusual for us to be out of town that weekend.
So the 30th and the 1st, you'd be out of town, you think? Maybe?
I mean, we can do it. It's just, I haven't booked anything yet, but annually we tend to be out of town that weekend.
Okay.
So, but if it works for everyone, I can probably make it work. Send my kids out of town without me, which is fine.
One thought, since we're not going to be launching into a biennium budget preparation, one thought is to do it in September.
Well, let's still give staff time to take any of the kind of new initiatives that pop up and try to fold them in or figure out what the budget implications will be.
I think so, especially if we do it in early September.
Deborah?
Just trying to problem solve this. I mean, and you feel like we need, given that we have this retreat, I mean, we do need the 2 full days? I mean, for example, we could do, a Thursday 5 to 9 and a Friday, then we're still only taking 1 day off our day jobs. It's just another thought. But if we need 2 days, that's not going to work. We could break it up and have, 2 half days and then the overnight or something. I don't know. Just thinking it through.
So let's step back a second. What's the goal of this retreat? What do we want to get done in the retreat? Because typically the move into this zone was to kind of nest it into budget. I think so.
Councilmember Baker, your microphone.
We're losing the ability to set the goals for the city manager. That's been one of the main reasons for the retreat being in January. And so it was said, well, okay, let's go ahead and change it to June. And we can set goals and work plan in June. Now we're saying, let's move it to September. Let's cut it to a half a day and maybe a full day on Saturday. And in September, when the year is almost over and Rob's evaluation is in the end of October, November. So how are we going to evaluate him with only not even 2 months of having set his goals.
Well, you
So
wouldn't
I'm
use,
confused.
you wouldn't use those goals to evaluate them. You'd use the existing prior to that. But you're raising a good point. They were nested. There's no doubt about that. Nigel?
Yeah, I mean, I know that we're still kind of adjusting and figuring out what this new system looks like, where we're not, bringing up priorities in January and where we're not setting new goals in January and trying to align it more with the budget. So I think we're still trying to figure out what that means for us as a body. And I think if we were to do goals there, which would make sense, those would have to apply to the following year essentially. Because they would be aligning with the new priorities that we're asking for that would align with the budget that we're passing for the following year. But the question really is, can we find the days that we need to make it work?
Melanie, David, and Karina.
I don't want to be a blocker on the 30th and 1st if I'm the only one that has tentative plans for that weekend, so I can go with that. I also do want to say, I think May makes more sense than going further into July. So I can do the 2 weekends, the weekends between Mother's Day and the following week. Or I guess that does run into Memorial Day is probably the 29th. So the weekend of the 20th in May, I can do any weekend but the weekend of the 16th, 17th, 18th.
So
In June.
if you're looking into May, the latest weekend without running into Memorial Day would be the 19th and 20th.
But I'm okay.
Karina's okay. Melanie's okay.
My daughter-in-law graduates from grad school that day, and I want to be there on May 19th. So,
What about doing it on, well, okay. You could bump it to the 12th and 13th.
Of May?
I'm just looking at the calendar. David and then Karina, while you guys are looking at your schedule, you had something you had to say?
Yeah, I just think it's imperative that we get our goals set and aligned with the budget. We have been, I don't want to say chasing shiny pennies, but something to that effect for the past year. We are bringing up new programs that affect our budget, affect our staffing every week. And we need to set a work plan. We need to set our priorities and stick to it. That's my 2 cents.
Karina?
I would be fine with moving to that first weekend in May. Or if we want to think about the council retreat in kind of a slightly different format, looking at that last weekend in June, but Thursday and Friday, like the evenings. Usually there's kind of an in-depth city report kind of update from each department. We could always do that as a study session. There's nothing saying that we have to do this all packed in one day and then a half day. We could kind of spread it out so that it's doable for all of our members. I think some flexibility would be nice.
Okay, other comments? Melanie and then Nigel.
I do want to just go back to the concept of fun and connection, and I think that is one major purpose of the retreat. I'm flexible. My only things are June 17th, that weekend, and I was tentative on 4th of July. If no one else has anything that weekend, I'm totally fine with booking it.
Nigel.
I was going to say the same thing. I think, going back to the conversation around council relations, having some actual time and not just, cutting off, doing a half day at city council, in city hall or something like that. It's useful. There's something to be said for just getting out of our normal environment and interacting with each other in a different space. I'm not saying that's the reason for the retreat. We also get a lot of business done in the retreat also. But I think we're overdue for kind of the opportunity that presents itself when we, put together a robust day and a half or 2 days worth of work and we get down to it.
I'm, based on what the deputy mayor said, I'm leaning towards Friday, the 30th of June and the 1st of July. Major problem with that? Staff, coworkers? All right. All right, well, let's go with the 30th of June and the 1st of July.
Okay.
So we are looking at 2 days, all day Friday, most of the day Saturday. Any thoughts on location?
Karina?
I think that it can be exciting to go away, of course, but I think our community has experienced a very large tax increase, property increase of 3% on their housing, right? And I think the council taking maybe a retreat out of city might not be shined upon too well. I'd rather have it here at City Hall or even support a venue in our city borders because our community is trying to recover from the pandemic. I'd like to see us make an active step in this way to help support and uplift our community, whether it's the lodge or whatever. I would be fine. I just think that as we emerge with our community from the pandemic, being mindful of where our community is at in their different phases too is should be reflective of what we also are considering. I don't want it to look, out of touch with our community.
Joe?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Other comments? Deborah?
I have mixed feelings. Having had the retreat only away from Kenmore, I really see the value of that because it prevents people from physically or mentally going home, and it kind of forces you to be in the moment, very present. That said, I would love a way to support our businesses through it. So I don't, those are two contradictory statements. And I'm not sure how to reconcile, but if somebody else has thoughts on that, that would be great.
Nigel?
Yeah, I mean, if we do a retreat in Kenmore, even if it's at the lodge, then we will all just go home at the end of the night. There's no place or space for community building with us because people will go home. That's not a bad thing. It just is the reality of it. We will lose the team building aspect of it. It will be a meeting, which is fine, but we need to recognize that. The other thing I will say is that even if we just went to the lodge and used their facilities and ate their food, it would probably cost more than what we paid in LaConner in the past from the invoices, from the quotes I've seen from there. So we're talking from a purely financial standpoint, LaConner might actually make more sense than the lodge. It is not a cheap place to book time or buy food.
Karina and Angela?
I think everybody has some really good thoughts on this. The caveat I would say is, are we going to support local jobs? It'd be great if we could. Are we going to support local business? It'd be great if we could. Are we going to help our community thrive through the work we do together in retreat? We could. There's nothing stopping us. And it wouldn't be difficult for a community to attend because it would be nearby. It's just a thought. If we go elsewhere, yes, we support, other parts of our region. And that's great too. I just think emerging from the pandemic and supporting our local business infrastructure is really important. And how the community perceives what we are doing is also important. I think that from what I'm already hearing in the community, it's kind of a touchy subject, but mindfully, when we're looking at mindful growth, it's always best to be out of your normal environment and away from and free from distractions, to be in a healthier growth mindset space. And that's, evident and scientifically proven. So I recognize all aspects around this issue, and I can support any way the council prefers to go.
Angela?
I was wondering if someone might be able to recap where previous retreats have taken place, because I'm not familiar with where past retreats have taken place. So can someone share some ideas?
Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
So they've been almost always out of town. And the reason for that has been to spend time other than business in your business environment. So they have been places like Port Ludlow, they have a place there. LaConner has been probably the closest and best for you because it's hour maybe to get there. Trying to think, I think one year they went down to South Canal. So they've been away. On Ludlow.
Don't forget Gig Harbor. We went
Right.
to
We did
Gig
Bremerton
Harbor
too. We did Bremerton
Yeah.
once, yeah.
Bremerton, yeah.
So the council had chosen over the years to take this one opportunity to optimize not being in the business environment for the reasons that you've talked about. So what happened is that you were able to spend people time together in ways that you typically don't spend that time and do that work. That's almost historically consistent throughout, I think. There might have been a couple summer retreats. I think there was one up at it's no longer a seminary anymore. It's a hotel or something, right? In St. Edwards. So, and I think that was a summer budget retreat. So that has been pretty much what you've done. Yeah. So.
We could consider trying one of the islands, Orcas Island, Woodby Island. That is, you can get there utilizing multiple routes of transportation and explore part of the Great Pacific Northwest, fun ways of traveling via ferry. And there's a lot to do and see and explore that could be combined with one of those spaces. Just a thought.
Nigel, and then Melanie.
When I first joined council, I was deeply skeptical of going out of town for the retreat, from both a financial standpoint and also just trying to make it work with the day job and everything else. And having done it with people who I had real fundamental policy differences with, I found it to be really rewarding, both from the productivity standpoint, and also just from the change in venue. I really find the change in venue to be valuable for not just me, but for the body. Because like Councilmember Shrevenick said, it just kind of changes your mindset and gets you a little bit more in the moment. And the other thing that I pushed for and that we did was we live streamed those meetings our first year or two might have been a little janky as we figured out the Wi-Fi issues with one of the hotels and how to make that work, but it got a lot better. And that was something that I pushed for heavily because I do think it's important that our publics are able to listen if they want to. And that is something that I would want us to be doing no matter where we're going, if it's here or if it's there, or if it's, you know, in LaConner. But there is something valuable about changing venues and just having that different environment. I just think the retreats that we've had elsewhere, I think have been more fruitful than the ones we did over Zoom. Those were rough. Those were real hard for me, just sitting in front of my computer for 8 hours straight. That was really difficult. And versus the ones that we've had here, which are, again, we've gotten business done. But sometimes a change in venue and a change in mindset can really help us be better at our jobs. So.
Okay, Melanie and then Rob.
I want to support what our mayor just said, and I'm going to say this does not feel like a retreat to me. This feels like a council meeting. And I think we do have some connectivity issues and that can be, we have not had an in-person retreat since LaConner, which was in 2020. We're due. We have actually saved money 2 years in a row and not having excursion retreats. So just calling attention to that, but there is something, I believe there's a benefit in coming together in a different environment, different setting that does awaken our brains. And, you know, as much as it's nice to be close to home, I care about us having the best, most creative ideas for our city and for us to have the opportunity to connect in a different way as a council and with staff. So I fully support getting away. I like any number of ideas. Alderbrook comes to mind. I think we had talked about Seabrook in the past. Whidbey Island is great, and it's probably one of the easiest places to get to. So Bainbridge, there are any number of places we can go. I support it. I think it's worth the investment. And you know, we may get some criticism for it, but it is actually an investment in our community. That is what it is. It's geared toward us coming together for our community in the best possible way as a council.
Rob?
Yeah, I'm probably echoing a lot of what's been said already, but it's really important that you all work well together as a team. I'm not saying you need to agree on things all the time, but it's so important that you work well together as a team. It, in a way, how you work well and get along with each other sets a tone for the community. It kind of ripples through the community. And I can guarantee you it ripples through the organization. And so the better you can work together, the better it is for the community and for the morale of my coworkers. And the other thing about that is, you know, you make multi-million-dollar decisions, and you make decisions that last for generations. The long-range planning that you do, that's going to affect thousands of people for many years to come. A lot of those people have not even been born yet. So you're making some important decisions, whether from a dollar perspective or impacting lives for generations. And so I think it's worth the investment to do what you need to do once or twice a year to really figure out how to work well together and unwind together and team build and all those things. So.
Okay. Go.
Yeah, I also want to echo the mayor's financial concern, or at least saying, yeah, let's try to be somewhat fiscally responsible about where we're going. And I think Councilmember File too had alluded to that. And yeah, maybe the on the working well together being emphasized yet again. Maybe it's you know, something that also works like 12 Angry Men, that movie where it was one person at the beginning, and then there was a lot of shouting and a lot of interpersonal connection that eventually, strangely enough, and all that. Maybe That's the model then that comes for at one point, the cohesion may not seem and the teamwork may not seem as evident, but it's the pursuit of truth that wins them all over and gets them all eventually working together. Just inspired me on that from the city manager. Mention that again. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? So I'm hearing, I think, momentum to have well, Deborah and then Karina.
I think maybe other people have said it, and although your examples made me think of it, Michael, it would be nice to be somewhere where there is an opportunity to get outside and, walk around or do something outside, particularly that time of year, since we are pushing it, even closer into the summer. We have a, decent opportunity for decent weather. And I don't know where that, where that could be. I mean, Woodby Island is great, can be really pricey. But, I don't know, the Kitsap, the Peninsula, or, somewhere. Bremerton, I can't remember if Bremerton had that, but anyway, just an idea.
Okay, Karina?
I think it would be nice to also be sure that we're being more mindful in our travel, that we're actively planning to commute together, whether we need to take a couple vans, whatever that we have available. I think that that's one step we could utilize to reduce our global carbon footprint, right? And be mindful in our way of we're traveling together. Because it's easy to hop in your car and jump out and then have multiple cars on the road. And that's the opposite of our values, right? And it's also the opposite of what we're trying to further teach our community about opportunities of co-ridership, transportation. So I'd like to make sure we're walking the walk with the talk.
I know historically you have carpooled to different places and also just spent that time together too. So I think has been the past. So I'm hearing some momentum to going away, not, for this time, we picked the time. I guess you can decide through some collaborative process where, and the other piece you'll need to do is find out what would be available to you as well. Do we need any more discussion on this? You need more decision making on this? Okay. Okay. Right. We have some more stuff. We have financial condition of the city. Yeah, I think we're scheduled to take a break after that. Are you guys okay? All right, let's go. Financial.
Well, I think one of the council members, one or two, raised this issue, and I'd like to hear from them.
They did. I think the specific question was not just the financial condition of the city, but the impact of inflation on the city. That was the focus in terms of, what, and I can identify, I think, who. Angela was the person that brought it up, but it wasn't brought up as a topic by others, but others raised the question in conversation. They didn't say let's do it, but it was raised as sort of, well, we know what inflation is, and so it was sort of a check-in on how that may have changed things with your budget or so on. So
it wasn't so much like a question of what is the financial condition of the city at this time, because I know we just went through the budgeting process and we get updates on a regular basis. It was more of like, I'm thinking of in the future, high rates of inflation and what are the impacts to our city, our residents, stuff like that. So there wasn't a specific question behind it.
Yeah, can I respond? Yeah,
please.
I say yes, I'm holding in my hands the budget. And yeah, back then we knew that inflation was high. And so we talked about it in the budget letter and also reflected it in our estimates. In the budget letter, I talk about how we adopted a financial sustainability plan in late 2020. And based on what we knew then, we had a balanced budget through 2028. But then things happened and inflation went up a lot higher than was assumed in the financial sustainability plan forecast. And then we also had the big 14% jump in the police contract and then the new positions. And so all those things are making it so the lines are going to cross sooner than 2028. We have a balanced biennium budget through 2024. Assuming our assumptions hold strong, and we had, inflation built into that. We also had some mild recessionary assumptions in the revenues. So for example, we're showing a decline in building permit revenue and land use permit revenue, and also a 2% decline in sales tax. So with those declines in sales tax, we do have a balanced budget through the end of the biennium. But in the budget letter, I talk about how we will probably need to reconvene the Financial Sustainability Plan Task Force probably in early 2024. So yeah, we're going to need to reconvene that task force to help us figure out how to keep the lines from crossing beyond 2024.
Questions, comments? Karina?
So, I've also been very concerned about this, and I don't think there's an aspect of our community that doesn't feel it. Everybody is feeling the impact of inflation at every level, and the disparities where they are at are feeling them even harder, especially seniors, persons with disabilities, people of differences, where there's still funding gaps. But I do know our task force had made some recommendations we chose to kind of hold back on. And if we have to revisit some of those recommendations, I think we should have a study session on it and reevaluate the opportunities that were presented to us, and where we might have to pivot a little bit in the next year before reconvening the task force. And then the other thing is that part of the discussion we've been having with missing middle housing and those housing solution models is about mixed business use. And one of my greatest concerns through that discussion is kind of a more restrictive business approach rather than a broader sense of considering all kinds of different types of businesses and, restaurateurs and, wineries even for tasting rooms. I think we can have a more creative, open mindset to help provide opportunity, access, and resources to our community and become a greater site of area and interest to stop in Kenmore and check it out. And then the other thought is on the issue of permits, we get to see kind of how many permits have been issued, what's wrapped up and whatnot. But I've been noticing some cities in different municipalities across the US are doing something that's called a heat map. And so it's a heat map that they publish on their website of the permits issued or in the work, actively construction's going on, or you're in the completion phase. And those heat maps are really great for community to be able to see where is this work happening at, where is our growth happening, and there's less confusion. But it's a tool I'd like to see us maybe engage with just some thoughts that I've been piling up in the back of my mind.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, questions on the financial situation, inflation, impacts? Okay, nothing? All right. Let's move to the next item. You need a break? Let's take a break. Let's take a break real quick. Come back in 10 minutes. Okay, let's resume. The next item was put on there by Karina, and that was how will new programs be considered next year? And I think she had that question. She wanted to have a quick conversation about that item. So
Well, I think that's a great space for our city manager to start us off. Mr. City Manager?
Well, I can tell you what I hope the answer is. Yeah, so you've set the work program for this budget. And I feel like you saw in your packet all the, how full everybody's work plans are. But if you want to introduce new stuff, my recommendation is do it at the June, July retreat. That's what I'm hoping the answer is. So.
Nigel.
Yeah, and introducing new things at the 2-day retreat that previously was in January was kind of our practice for a long time. And it worked out really well because then staff knew what their work plan was for the year and we weren't disrupting that mid-year. So I would hope that we would be looking at bringing things at June.
Okay, Karina.
Great. I was thinking on some of the topics of that we did bring back, which is one of those things that's near and dear to my heart is public safety and well-being. So we talked about the policy for requiring life preserver wearing and where that might be accessible at. So looking at when that policy and ordinance will come back to us at some point when the chief is ready with that, and maybe even how we engage access to the resource of life preservers. I noticed that the city of Kirkland, when they first started that, they started it with buckets they had at no kidding, at their different park locations. And then they ended up building little park shelters that you could hang up life preservers on, and they just go out and they replenish them if they dwindle. They marketed it. I know that we have a staff person who's working on that, and I would just like to have a little bit of understanding of what to expect and when.
Stephanie.
Thank you for bringing that up. And I did reach out to Chief Moen this week and he's looking into it. So Lake Forest Park has something on the books. So he's looking to see what that is and work with the King County Sheriff's Office. So he started working on that this week.
Great.
Nigel.
Yeah, and I might suggest that something like that, a question like that could be handled well in a one-on-one also. Or like we did earlier when we had updates in this agenda, that would have been a good, if you wanted a quick update, that would have been a better place for it, I think, than in a discussion around how will new programs be considered this year, because that's an old program and we're just asking for an update. So just for efficiency's sake, I guess.
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor, and I invite you to work with our city manager and our retreat organizer to better clarify that for the agenda, as that's part of your duties is confirming part of the agenda. I would have been happy to have this discussion earlier, but it's communicated to have it here. And so thus I'm having the discussion in this placeholder. In all due respect.
With all due respect, I would have asked that you might have brought this up with Michael, so it could have been put into the agenda and planned for by staff rather than brought up in an unrelated topic. That's all. We're talking about new programs to be considered, not life preservers. And we will work better as a body if we stay within the agenda items we have in front of us instead of bringing items from left field and throwing off kind of the flow of what we're discussing. There was no way that I could have known that there was an expectation that we'd be discussing life preservers at tonight's meeting from looking at this agenda. And I had no indication that Michael had any indication from you that that was something that we were hoping to discuss tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think there's any ill will here, and this would be the new program getting started And I had brought it up in one-on-ones, and I had asked where it would come up at. So I did everything on my end to bringing it to the table in the right space. I'm sorry if there's a lack of understanding, but that just highlights the beauty of working with multiple departments and how we do our work together and how we can clarify our work, right? So all good intent going forward. It's all good. I'm glad to hear that our chief is looking at Lake Forest Parks policy, and I believe one of our staff members is working on the program piece. I just look forward to an update at some point. Thank you.
David.
Yeah, life jackets. At our boat launch, there is life jackets for people to take for free. When Squires Landing or Aquatic opens again, the dragon boat program has life jackets that are available to anybody who's dragon boating. They don't need to bring one. The canoe and kayak program has life jackets. They can get them whenever they're part of the program with canoe and kayak. And the rowers provide life jackets for the rowing program.
I need to interject. This is a special meeting and we can only talk about things that are on the special meeting agenda. And life jackets is not on this agenda.
And we had an agreement outside of this meeting that it would be coming back from us for a policy at a later date, so.
Angela?
Well, I was hoping to get a recap on maybe like what this topic is supposed to entail. Like how will new programs be considered? Was it just a general question about like how are we going to introduce new topics, or did we already answer it with the mayor's response? Or was there any further discussion about how we're going to handle new programs?
That's up to you, but I'm hoping the answer is if you want to bring up new things, bring them up at the June retreat.
Okay.
Okay. Joe.
And with like one likely exception that we've had historically too is when there's been emergencies. I think we've responded, when there's been emergencies, and then maybe even particularly the the Simons Road crosswalk issues in front of Inglemore. I think we responded kind of quickly on that after that. I don't think it had been brought up previously before the concern was raised in the community, but just an exception, to the general rule.
Deborah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a built-in exception process, which is you bring something up at staff or council comments, and you get a second for interest. And then that topic is then brought to a subsequent council meeting for further fleshing out. So we kind of have that. That isn't exactly kind of the emergency thing, but that also is our own fail safe. I know I want to support several of us who have talked about the issue that we're not supposed to talk about today in terms of an update. I think there was both a policy and a programmatic ask on that, and that was in the past. But I mean, I was just assuming that things that we agreed on eventually come back and we'll hear about them. And so I think there's just an assumption that we will eventually hear about it.
Nigel and then Angela.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify the rules around council comments and bringing up new things, because we maybe have been a little lax on it, but the rules are actually, you bring up a topic, you have to go second for discussion, and then we have to have either a majority or consensus to place on our future agenda. So it's not just, I just want to be clear on that. I don't want people thinking that two people create staff work and an agenda item on a later meeting.
Okay. Angela.
My comment isn't specifically about this issue, but it is kind of related to council relations, which we have talked about previously. And I just want to point out, because it just happened and is in the moment, but I think we all know that our mayor is, responsible for running the meetings and holding us to a certain decorum. And I think when he speaks up, like we shouldn't attack him like personally. I felt like that comment was kind of crossed the line. And I think is an example of where things become personal or judgmental or shame, like shaming maybe. And I just think that it just doesn't need to be personal that way.
Karina?
Yeah, thank you for those comments. Interesting comments. There's two ways to go on that, per the training we have, which is you can make a point of order. We're having kind of a more discussion oriented structure, and there wasn't a personal attack. There is a definitions that we all agreed to. And that was pointing out the definition in the process. And so I think as it was already discussed, and I think that the whole point has been made and moot because we had moved on, is that there had been communications, there had been communication breakage or the lack of no. And it was just a point of, being more aware. Personal attacks are very pointed and direct. So a little bit different. There's a recognition versus a personal attack.
Deborah?
Or an observation.
Thanks. I know I'm going to try to make it a practice. I'll endeavor to do this. You can correct me if I fail. To, when the mayor redirects us, instead of, well, not instead, just thank you. Thank you for that helpful guidance. We'll move on. Appreciating that he's trying to organize the meeting and not taking it personally and trying not to be defensive. So I hope we can all try to do that because he's doing his darndest to try to facilitate. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on. The next one is town halls. Next two are offered up by Melanie, Swamp Creek Restoration, and town halls. So, and I know it's been a while, and this is one reason I'm a little reluctant to do our agenda building interviews so far from the retreat, but we were trying to be efficient. So I'm going to give it to you, Melanie, realizing it's been almost 2 months since we talked, but.
Well, I'm glad this is at the end of the meeting rather than the beginning. So
Okay.
I think on town halls, I think there would be some benefit to have opportunity for two-way conversation with our community on the major issues that we face, including environment, missing middle, health, so many of the things that we're facing, creating an opportunity for us to be asked questions and provide nuanced answers, I think would be very beneficial, especially after COVID. I think we talked about this earlier about that separation feeling that can happen through working through screens and not seeing faces and responses and having the additional nuance of, what it's like to be in person. Communication is so much more than just our voices. And anyway, so I think I'd heard some talk around and interest in, and I believe in the past, I heard from Councilmember Baker that we've had some really great practice with it. So I will share that. I'll open there. I support some form of town hall. I don't know what it will take for our community or for our staff to create that environment. But if there's a way that we can open a door, I think it would be great.
David?
Councilmember Baker.
We did that number of occasions. Kenmore Elementary School, Morelands, and Arrowhead. We've also used the high school. The meetings were very well attended because you're going into the individual neighborhoods. And the equipment that we had to bring was rather minor. We just brought a loudspeaker and a microphone. And usually the rooms were small enough where the gyms, people were sitting close enough to it so that we could talk. There really wasn't an issue. So it's not that a lot of equipment has to be brought out, but it gives each part of the community a chance to feel like they're heard. But now with Zoom, the way it is in the markings, we have much more opportunity for public input. But there's something lost when it's not face-to-face. And so having that face-to-face opportunity along with Zoom, I think is great. I don't know that we have to give face-to-face, Zoom opportunities when we're out in the field, because there's opportunities for people to come much closer to their home at a good time. And we restrict Zoom to when we're actually meeting in the chambers, and encourage people to come and participate. So I think it's a great idea. I'd love to see us back in the public again.
Karina?
Thank you. I really like this topic, and I do love the idea of using targeted universal approaches to meeting our community in the community, part of the community that they live in, reside, and play in. So utilizing the schools is a great way to do that. I know Inglemoor High School, the school board is hoping that we'll be utilizing their new auditorium theater space. I'm sure that our community would be responsive, and I absolutely support this. One thing on Zoom, I will say that Zoom is a way to bring that public transparency to what we are doing, because we do record and share that outward. We use transcription. When that gets uploaded to YouTube, there's many language options and choices people can utilize to have access to what we're doing in the language that they are most comfortable with. So it's just another bridge in our tool belt, and that we are so lucky to have access to. So thank you, Councilmember O'Kane, Deputy Mayor O'Kane, for bringing that up. And Michael, thank you for facilitating a great meeting tonight.
Well, thank you. Any other comments on the town hall? Nigel, I had a quick question for David. Historically, and were these town halls where you actually went and conducted council meetings, or were these more gatherings to where you just talk with folks? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I remember they stopped doing them before I was on council, but I remember one at NUD, maybe two at NUD, actually. I also think that's where you were holding your meetings there for a little while while this building was getting built. And then I remember having one probably here, actually, where the council was kind of sitting in front of the dais and talking to folks and passing the mic around. I think it's a great idea to get into the schools and do that in the gyms and get people together. I think there's probably some logistical issues around trying to, hybrid meetings have been technically hard to do. I'm not sure if I'm just a little concerned around the technical side of trying to do that with the town hall, but I think getting into the neighborhoods would be great, and kind of figuring out what a schedule of that looks like. If we did 1 or 2 a year, that would be a massive increase from where we've been, and I think it'd be good to get into the neighborhoods.
Councilmember Baker.
When we're out in the neighborhoods, and we're discussing the neighborhood problems, it's close enough that people should be able to come, and I don't think that we necessarily should have the hybrid option at that point. We keep the hybrid option for when we're here in City Hall.
I tend to agree with you on that.
Angela?
I agree with what's already been said. I think we've been asked explicitly by community members to hold town halls, so we definitely know residents want it. And I think our attendance at Coffee with Council has sort of died off a lot. Maybe because it's online, I don't know, but we only get, a handful of people unless there's like a really big, important topic coming up. So I think this is a great way to get out and reach more of our community members.
Any other comments? Well, I'm hearing interest, and you did it before, so it sounds like doability is there. On the topic of wider access, you could probably just record it and make that available to people, given the neighborhood feel is one way to get halfway to what you're trying to do. But any other comments on this before we move to the next one? Okay. Swamp Creek restoration.
Yeah, I added Swamp Creek restoration after our TOD conversation and the dissenting, I can't remember what minority report. Thank you. Planning Commissioner Tracy Benishinsky brought to us, and the response from our council. Where I brought this up was, I think, twofold. One, I just want to acknowledge how exciting it was to see our council's response to the possibility of doing something with Swamp Creek going forward. And this has been affirmed from a couple of meetings I've been to in the past 2 days, one in Olympia on Tuesday and one yesterday at Leadership Eastside. Climate resilience, environmental resilience is really one of the most important, strongest ways that we can combat climate change. And as climate action is at the top of our priorities, which is something I think that we can be quite proud of. I'm curious, and this will probably be a bigger conversation at other points. I just want to call this out. What I'm finding, as a member of RIA 8 and knowing that we've had funding and other things come up over the past, opportunities for grants that we're not able to apply for because we don't have something specific related to, say, a Swamp Creek capital project. What are we going to do to start building towards that really big investment in leadership on climate action that our community is in a really great position to lead on? So that's kind of at the root of it. It was just kind of to talk about it and say, I'm looking forward to more. I know staff's working on it. I know it's new. I know we're going to hear more, but that was the root of it. It's like, this is a place where our city can be a great leader, showing we can look at land that maybe was improperly developed and transform it into something better for the long term of our community and our world. And how are we going to do it? How are we going to start shifting and making those investments? Which, what the cool part is, when we do that, we're investing in our community, feeding the economy, which is ultimately really great for everybody and the planet, because we're doing something that has such a long-term impact. So I think I had just want to draw awareness around it. I don't know that others have much to say, but I want to thank everyone for just their openness to looking at this and taking a more cautious approach on that segment of the TOD when we were having that discussion.
David?
I agree with Tracy and I agree with what you're saying, but I'm very hesitant to approve it piecemeal. If we're going to do restoration work on Swamp Creek, we need to do restoration work on Swamp Creek as far as we can. We did take action in Everett a couple of years ago with some illegal parking going on and drainage into Swamp Creek, but we have to continue. We need continued effort with the Snohomish County Council to try to stop pollution within that border, but also within our own city. There is the water that is actually dumping in to the Sammamish River is extremely polluted. We had people living under the bridge on 80th and 522 that were defecating and urinating into that stream. And there wasn't much that we could do from the way I understood it, because that's not really our property and we can't really chase people off of it. But we have a lot of work to do in our own backyard. And I really don't want to see piecemeal to clean this little piece there by the bowling alley. And then maybe 5 years from now, clean another little piece. And by that time, we've let the first piece go. So I would rather see this as a holistic approach and not a piecemeal approach.
Okay, Melanie and then Karina.
And Councilmember Baker, I agree with you. A holistic approach is incredibly important. I see it as very big as well. So thank you for bringing that up.
Okay, Karina and then Nigel.
Thank you. I think we're doing beautiful work on Swamp Creek and, improving our surrounding parks and habitat restoration. I'm really happy and very proud of our council for the action we took. I'm very grateful to Commissioner Banaszewski for her bravery in bringing that piece forward. I think many of us were thinking it, and it was good. It was good to have somebody say what needed to be said, and we respond, appropriately, and we did. So thinking about Swamp Creek, and after watching the Planning Commission meeting this last week, I'm a little surprised to hear about a road that might go through Swamp Creek. Why? And that's a little surprising. And near the Rookery, why? So I just need to understand sometimes when we're engaging work at the council level and we're asking for environmental input by experts, and we're waiting for that input, and we're also hearing about the possibility of a future road, I want to know why. It just doesn't make sense. And it seems to leave the impression of the many recalls I have received that we're not walking the walk when we've committed to an effort. So I understand there's an effort to move forward with the design and ideas and principle, but I think we still are in the works of getting the environmental expert out, right, to make some recommendations. I'm just worried about the future of environmentally sensitive areas and our commitment to that work.
Right, Nigel, then Deborah.
Sorry, I think that begs the question. Mr. Vicente, do we have any plans to build a road through Swamp Creek?
No, we don't. I think the road you might be thinking about is an access road that we're proposing through the existing developments that exist south of Swamp Creek. So through the park and ride, and where we've got a future townhome project going in and near the bowling alley.
Thank you. And so that's kind of in some of this carved out buffer space that we did commit to doing some environmental research on for sensitivity's sake before moving on to develop. As I remember, and per the discussion we had as a council with the carve out.
Nigel, were you finished?
No, actually.
Okay.
No,
We Nigel and then Deborah.
Couple of things. One, to Councilmember Baker's question about work that we continue to do. I know a couple of years ago, I raised to staff that Snohomish County was looking to extend a road directly through some of the creeks that lead into Swamp Creek, up in unincorporated, just kind of west of the gun range. And I actually called Jared Mead, who I know from working at the legislature, who represents the area for Snohomish County. And our attorney went to their hearing about it, and that project has not shown up again. I don't know what their transportation and infrastructure plan looks like, but they didn't move forward a couple years ago. And I think I got the message across to me that maybe it didn't make any sense. So we have still been kind of doing things, or at least I've been trying to keep an eye on projects upstream. The other thing I will say is, and I do appreciate, like everybody, Commissioner Banazinski bringing all this forward. I think what's important that we do is that and I think this is the plan, is that we have somebody look at the entirety, from, where the Swamp Creek enters into the Sammamish River all the way up through our borders, and identify through there what the most effective things that we can do is. And it may not be the things that are the most visible. It may not be the things that that community is asking for specifically, like specific projects. But I think it's important that what we do is scientifically will have the biggest impact ecologically. So I'm really hoping that we will look at that whole corridor, essentially, get a list of potential projects, get a list of kind of what the thought is of the effectiveness to bring life back into the ecosystem and making it as resilient as possible. And then essentially, like we would with the transportation, with, list of transportation plans, list them out and start figuring out how the funding goes from there. And yeah, it will take years, frankly. This is not a short-term thing. This is probably a decades-long thing, but I think it's important that we that we hit the most effective things first, even if it's not the projects behind the bowling alley, or if it's something else, that we'd be open to that.
Deborah, then David.
100% agree with Mayor Herbig, and I believe that is the direction that we're going, is doing an analysis of what would be the most effective interventions. So I'm actually really excited about where we ended up. My comment has to do with the process that it took to get there. And I guess I'm not convinced that Tracy's report was actually the minority. I mean, it certainly wasn't on the council, and I have a sense that even on the planning commission, there was keen interest in working to restore Swamp Creek, or at least investigate what it would take and what would be effective there, at the same time considering the TOD needs and the needs of housing and development. I guess I'm hoping that going forward, we try to really listen to what people's concerns are, and not get into we need to do this or that. And if there is a way to do this and that, because the issues that we're grappling with require us to do that, I think. It is typical that development and environmental issues are sometimes, maybe conflict is too strong a word, but are not always aligned. Those interests are not always aligned. And so I think, this will be a repeated thing. These are our top two goals, and we know that they can come in conflict with each other. So I'm hoping we can use this as an example of how we get to both and. Just want to say that.
Okay, David, and then Rob says that Richard might have a update on some of this conversation. Is that true? David.
Yeah. I think if I had a better understanding from the city side of what we would like to have from Snohomish County. I mean, I'm in a unique position on the Sound Transit Board because I'm with Dave Summers at least once a month and have many opportunities to talk to him about different things. And I know I've talked to him about Kenmore on occasion. So we have some good opportunities here, at least to raise some issues and try to have some awareness of Kenmore and what's happening. So.
Okay, Richard.
Better dead. There we go. This one's working. Yeah, so I think shortly after the TOD discussion that was brought up, Rob asked me to start, my team to start looking into putting together some kind of analysis to actually look more Swamp Creek basin wide at properties that could have, and evaluate restoration potential, not just within the one area, but along Swamp Creek throughout the entire city of Kenmore. So I've started putting together a scope with our on-call environmental and engineering consultant, Osborne Consulting, to start scoping out and figuring out what information do we need in order to analyze these properties in an effort to very similar to what we've just are wrapping up with our culverts. We were in the same boat. It was grants would come, we wouldn't have something prepared, we wouldn't be able to defend kind of, well, this popped up and well, is it a good one to do? And so what we did was we went through all of our stream bearing culverts. We did a methodical approach of, if we repaired this one, what kind of fish barrier will we remove? How much habitat will it open up? What kind of gains would we get? What's the cost of this? And what we're coming up with is a list, a defensible list that says, here are your top 10. If you want the most bang for your buck, that's going to open up the most habitat and have the most benefit. And so we want to so Rob basically asked me, can you apply this model to Swamp Creek properties and provide me a list of, if an opportunity comes up, what would be the best property to go and get the most bang for the buck, that if we get X number of dollars, we could apply it here and get the most benefit. So I'll be working with our consultant, and there's a lot of desktop work we can do right off the bat. We've got lots of information, zoning, current use, ownership, aerial, LiDAR information, lots of existing data on where wetlands are, flooding issues, where we've done past projects. And then we can narrow it down, but we will need to also do a lot of field follow-up work. So we're going to need to work with biologists and surveyors to actually go out and get some real world data. We're actually going to look into maybe, looking into more current new technology that might be a more cost-effective ways of getting really good data, such as using drones, which you can actually gather survey grade quality very quickly and much more affordable than paying surveyors to spend days or weeks hacking through, critical areas to try and get you that same information. I'm still at the very early stages of kind of scoping this project out, so I don't really have a lot of detail, but that's where I'm at on that project. But the result will be hopefully this list, so that, and I've even come to council over the last couple of years, it's like, hey, this property is for sale. It sure would be nice. And we always have the same questions. It's like, well, is this the best way to do it? It's, property isn't cheap. But if we had something like this, it would be really helpful in helping you all make those decisions. So
Rob's going to add some stuff, and then Melanie and Nigel.
Okay, so Richard, thank you for that. Just remember, Richard's time and his budget is a zero-sum game. So he's suddenly now making room for a new project and getting a consultant and all that. And I think you guys want him to do that. Okay. But that means that something else that he was going to work on doesn't get worked on. And I'm pulling this out especially, this is Richard's department's work plan. There's 3 pages of this. 3 pages. And he's got a tiny team. And just complying with the NPDES regulations all by themselves takes his whole team. And new NPDES regulations are being imposed on us this year. So sorry to be the downer on this, but I guess you guys want him to work on this, and I guess I agree it's important. It's all important, but something's got to give. And if he works on this, he's got to make room in the budget, and he's got to make room in the schedule. So.
Okay, Melanie, then Nigel.
Trying to decide which order to go with my comments. Rob, I'm sure thankful that we're hiring or moving towards hiring a climate action plan manager and adding staffing, and he just reiterated why we need to be working on more funding for this. So thank you. It's fully defended. The smiles that I think I saw on people's faces listening to Richard talk about the actions that we're already taking to create defensible plans so we can get the grants to do this incredibly important work. Thank you. Sometimes when you speak, Richard, I just can sit here and I go, yes, like a real happy. I'm thankful for the work that you do for us. I'm thankful for our staff. Each of you on staff is a reminder of why it's such a great thing to be on a council for the city of Kenmore. So thank you. And it's really exciting to hear the direction you're going, the creativity that you're putting into it, and a tool for us to prioritize with. Thank you.
Nigel.
I just want to make sure that I heard what I heard, but I'm hoping that we're not looking at only just properties that we could purchase, but also, and what I thought I heard at our council meeting when we were talking about all this was also trying to find, most of Swamp Creek is part of somebody's property, if you look at the property lines, right? But find places throughout that entire ecosystem that, maybe aren't as healthy as they could be, that we could maybe partner with private landowners, or maybe we have grants. I don't know how all that would work, but there has to be more, I think, to the project than just acquisition. That's part of it. But I think because so much of it is in private property hands that we're not going to get a hold of, that we do need to be figuring out how to partner with those neighbors who I think all want a healthy Swamp Creek also, but maybe don't have the resources or even know what's going on in their deep backyard because they can't get back there. And, hopefully we'll get some of that through the survey work and other things. But I think it's important that we are looking beyond just acquisition of property.
Yeah, and this is looking at every property, public or private, and it would be restoration potential. So acquisition might just be one component of that. Yeah.
Deborah.
I had a similar comment actually, but also just making sure that we're leveraging, consultants on certain special projects. And it sounds like you are, and maybe there's some of this work that can't be done by consultants. It must be done in-house, but I think, there certainly is a role for consultants.
Okay, any other comments or questions on this one, Karina?
So I would say I absolutely agree with all my colleagues here. I love the idea of funding the CAP, ensuring that we can do the work even if we have to get a consultant. But I'm also open to seeing grants to fund a position. If we have to be creative to fund the CAP, right? And I'm seeing, to my left, we can champion the fan club from all the side of the table all around you. We got the person who works on trees, and we got the person who makes sure our community is running safe and clean and effective, and teams and environment. You have a fan club here of work that we support, and we want to make sure you're funded. So I hope you hear that. So hopefully we can help provide that funding strategy pathway when the topic of funding the CAP plan comes back to us. So thank you. Thank you all for your work.
Okay, anything else before we move to the next topic? Okay. Coffee with council, remote or in person, both. Nigel, I think Deborah brought this up, maybe for same reason, the difference, but I'll turn to that.
I probably brought it up because it keeps popping up as something that we talk about for a little bit during council meetings and then kind of push off. And I think we need to figure this out. I know there are a lot of people, well, at least in the times I've been in coffee with council, I know there's a handful of people who are very committed to Zoom. I do know we were getting different people or some different people when we were doing in person. I think we're probably to a point where we should be offering, I think we should be offering people an in-person option again. I would prefer Saturday mornings myself because those are the ones that I can make, but I really think it's worth doing that. I also, I'm aiming this at myself as well as everybody, but also myself. I also think that we all need to be making sure that we're signing up for at least one a quarter, maybe if possible, so that we're available to our constituents for these meetings. We can't just rely on a couple council members who are able to make most of the meetings. So those are the two issues that I'd like to discuss is one, are we okay? You know, are people okay with looking at going back to in person for one or both of the coffee with councils? And can we boost participation in coffee with councils?
Okay, those questions we'll address. I want to shift to Deborah. See, is that it?
I had the same two issues. I know at one point we talked about having a sign up sheet. So that we could think about that, because what happens now is, you know, the same few sign up, and then Nancy puts out an email and said, are you still doing it? And half of those people drop out. And so it is awkward.
David?
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of backed away now, but for a while I did them all. And Karina came on and we did a few jointly. And so I just figured, yeah, we need more people to step up. So I've just backed away for a little bit. It's not that I'm adverse, trust me, because I really enjoy those. But I want other people to become involved too. They need to go back in person.
Joe? And then Angela.
Aren't they at the outrageous hour of 8 or 9 a.m. Saturday morning? Which is it, 8 or 9? 8.
I think they're currently 8 on Saturdays, and I would frankly love to move them to 9 on Saturdays.
That's a barrier for me. Got to sleep in a little bit.
Okay, we're getting some action on this one. Okay, so Angela, David, Melanie.
So
No, Angela and then David.
I would like to see at least one of them back in person. I think you really just can't replace the in-person interactions and meetings 100%. I like the idea of having one online too, but I just don't know if that will be confusing to residents. And I also don't know if it makes sense to make like the Monday ones online or in person, or so I kind of feel like we just need to go with one or the other. And if we have to choose one or the other, I'd prefer in person. I wouldn't mind starting it slightly later, as Councilmember Marshall suggested, like 9 instead of 8 on Saturday. And then I think having a sign-up sheet would be much better than the way that we do it right now.
Okay, David, then Melanie.
yeah, I mean, we've tried them later in the afternoon, evening. That didn't work. So I'm sure you get up early to go to work. And so certainly 7:30 on a Monday is not, because you're getting up to go to work anyway. So I don't think that's too long, but we have tried different hours and they just haven't worked. So, I mean, we'll certainly try it again if that's what the consensus is, but.
Melanie?
I fully support having at least one meeting in person. I think Saturday is the best day, and I do recommend changing it to 9 a.m. I know some people may have early soccer games, but for me, I like that little extra time on my Saturdays compared to my weekdays. I'm sure our community members and members of our council might like the little extra time as well. So I fully support adjusting to 9, but if we keep it at 8, that's fine with me, but I'd like to see Saturdays in person. I know for me, in person makes it it just feels better. There's an exchange that happens in person that I really support. I think it also makes sense, like, for me, I feel pretty clear about what makes sense on days. Weekdays make sense for Zoom, because if I were to do a Monday, I can Zoom in and go to work, so that's, I really like the idea of in person.
Okay, any other comments? Corinna?
I couldn't agree more. I love the idea of a 9 o'clock on a Monday, let alone a Saturday. One of my favorite comments we get from community members is towards the end of a Saturday meeting is, "I'm going back to bed now." I mean, no one wants to get up that early on a Saturday morning on their day off, their one day off maybe even, but we have had a very committed set of council members who were willing to, take that on. I have also backed away. It's important to create space and see others step forward. We've had coffees with council completely canceled because no one would come forward to attend or host. And you can't make people, you can't take a horse to water and make them drink, right? They have to want to. And it's not a bad thing at all. It's just not everybody's schedules align with these times or the availability, or they have complex family schedules, whether it's football or cricket or swimming or canoeing. We all have complex lives. So I personally chose to take a little bit of a step back to devote a little bit more time to my family, as my family is at the age where they're about ready to leave home. And I want to spend a little bit of time with them before they do. And it's a great opportunity for others to step forward. And I want to celebrate them and support their connection and growth with the community. So I think that's really important as well.
Nigel?
Just one other quick thing too. I actually, I remember the first coffee with council that we had at the hangar. This is before the hangar was as popular as it was now. And I remember sitting at the large table that's next to the fireplace. And the person from DEIA asked what I was there for. And I said, well, we're doing coffee with council. She goes, oh, you're on council? I said, yeah. And I remember she came out with a plate of cookies. And then nobody showed up. Yeah, I did not. I think I had like one of the cookies. But the thing I will say, I usually, most mornings, Saturdays and Sundays, I usually will go over to the hangar and just, grab some coffee, read a book, people watch and all of that. And there's a lot of people using that right now. And if council were to start doing that, it would be a visible show of being in the community and talking to people. And I think at this point, we would get random people walking by and stopping for a second, which is not something we've had before, because even on the rainiest, nastiest days, that building is hopping on Saturdays. So I also want to give, when Councilmember Baker was mayor, he was very good about being at every single coffee with council. And I appreciate that. I can't emulate that myself because Mondays at 7:30 I can't do. But I'm willing to commit to doing all of the Saturday ones if other folks will join me, unless I'm on vacation or something. But I'm happy to put those on my calendar, especially if they're 9 o'clock, and be there and get other folks involved and do those on Saturdays.
David?
Yeah, I think you need to consider with 9 o'clock on Saturday is, what's that smaller room?
Beaver.
The Beaver.
Room.
That room will not be available. There will be people in there, and you will have a difficult time trying to find a major meeting place. So maybe we're going to have to reserve the Beaver at 9 o'clock in the morning to make sure that we have a place to meet.
I mean, it is our room, so.
Right. So I'm seeing nods as if it can be done. Deborah?
Yeah, I remember having coffee with the council in that room, and it's great. And I think, you could even put a little, sign that says, whatever it is, third Saturday, coffee with council, 9 o'clock. And there's a jillion people that would see that over the course of a month. I mean, not a jillion, obviously, but a lot of people come through that area and would see that. So I think that would be fun.
Anything else? So
I just want to know what we decided. So
that's where I'm going. So I think I heard that, yes, you like coffee with council. That time might be a little early. 9 kept popping up as an alternative. I think in person is where folks are leaning for sure. I didn't hear anybody begging to keep doing Zoom. And to keep in mind that I think Zoom becomes a way to access important meetings. One of the things you can do is start leading interpersonal interactions now, because once your community is now conditioned to not do that. Many of them are coming back in to do that. So starting this process will just facilitate that. And then the other thing was whether you sign up or not. I hear interest in people wanting to do it. My sense is that if you had a sign-up sheet, it would sure help. And if you just calendared the thing for the year and people could, you could actually do it. I don't know how you do it now, but that you have busy lives, so that might help you. So that's what I think I'm hearing.
And what did we decide about the first Monday coffee with council? Keep it the same? And virtual?
Angela?
I think that time is really difficult for most of the council members. I mean, if we moved it to 8, I would be able to do it. 7:30 is too early for me. I don't know if that time would work for others. So maybe other council members might want to weigh in on the time on Mondays.
David and Karina?
Yeah, it's 7:30 on Monday mornings. We've had good crowds come on Mondays at that time. So I really think the object was try to get people before they headed off to work, and it did work. If we move it to 8, I think it might be too late to catch that crowd. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, Karina, then Melanie?
I could support 8 o'clock, kind of a Monday meeting. If we had it both hybrid and in-person option, people could still participate if they were in commute. Frankly, if you look around this room, some people have kids that they're getting off to school just like our community does. And so that early hour is so very challenging. And even when we had community listening sessions, when we had them just slightly later in the morning, we had a highly successful turnout. People can flex with that a little bit better after they've adjusted the morning crazy start and launch with their family, right? So I think creating the flexibility and a healthy pathway towards participation and supporting community is a good thing. And I also support a sign.
Melanie?
I'm just processing. I had something. I think I'll stick with what I was going to say, but I want to make sure that Councilmember File hears that I heard what she said, and I respect it because it's. I do like the idea of going to all in person for coffee with council because it's coffee with council, and I like the idea of that. Or if it's, I think one or the other, Zoom with council or coffee with council, but maybe remove the coffee if it's Zoom. So there's something about coffee with council. I can go. As far as Mondays go, Mondays have been a time I can't do, my son goes to Kenmore High School. It's a terrible time for me to go to a meeting, So that's why I'm very strong on Saturdays. I can do those better. But I like the idea of coffee with council with people in person. I remember when I ran for office, learning that we did coffee with council, and it was something I kind of had this romantic idea about. And then,
COVID hit and, it just, anyway, I just want to put my plug in for all Coffee with Council. If it's called Coffee with Council, it's sit in a place where we can have coffee together.
Okay, anything else? Did you get what you needed? Ron?
What do you think you heard about the the Mondays?
So it's okay for some. Honestly, I think I'm not hearing tons of people going, "Yeah, let's do it Mondays." I'm hearing more people say Saturday or not a work day.
Well, right now it's.
Why couldn't you do both and alternate it?
Well, yeah, so you don't have enough info, Michael. So they do it twice a month. They do it on first Mondays and third Saturdays already. And so I think I've got the direction on the third Saturdays, but on the first Mondays component, I need to hear a little more. Do you want to do?
I
Zoom
honestly
with
heard
council?
that was hard for people. No one jumped up, but I think David said he could see the advantages of that, but I'm not hearing people all over that. Melanie? Yeah, correct. I'm hearing all people say, yeah, in person. Melanie?
I was just going to throw out there, maybe 2 Saturdays a month. Just putting it out there. I understand how the Mondays could work for a lot of people too, so I don't want to take that away, but for me, I'd be more available if it was 2 Saturdays a month. So just want to share that possibility.
Yeah, Joe?
Please use your microphones.
Okay.
I might be able to do that once in a while if dogs are allowed in the hangar, but I don't know. I don't want to set an improper precedent.
Jennifer? No. Unless it's a service dog.
Okay, David.
Yeah, you're really missing a group of people by getting rid of Mondays, because I know I always had people that showed up on Monday but never showed up on Saturday. So, and I had people that showed up on Saturday that never showed up on Monday. So I'd really hate to give up Mondays.
One solution is the council members that love Mondays could volunteer to do it. You can keep it. Right?
Great, I'm happy to.
Okay. There you go.
In person?
In person, 7:30.
Okay.
Okay.
No more Zoom. No more Zoom, I'm hearing.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's
Okay.
Okay. Karina, and then we'll see where we are on the
I think that's a lovely idea. I think when you say is the hangar building a dog space or not, that indoor outdoor space, when it's opened up, becomes the indoor outdoor space. And I have not seen anybody kicking anybody out with a dog. And it is what it is. So I just want us to be realistic about what we're seeing and saying and doing. So either we may need to create some signage, or I know public health wise, public health safety inspector wouldn't like to see animals walking through the space, but the reality is it does happen, and with some frequency.
I don't disagree that it happens. We're not over there, 24/7 to monitor, everything that's going on at the hangar, but just like in our parks, no dogs are allowed. There's no dogs allowed in the hangar. So, no dogs off leash. That's what I mean. Sorry. No dogs off leash in parks.
Okay, I was
sorry. I misspoke.
We can't take our dogs to the park anymore?
No, I'm sorry. But you see dogs off leash all the time is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to patrol that kind of thing, but
Gotcha.
service dogs are okay. Other
well,
dogs, we
Great,
would
thank
prefer
you.
to keep them outside.
So I just want to recap. All coffees with council are in person from now on, except for tomorrow morning. We're not gonna change anything tomorrow morning. And then the third Saturdays will be at 9 a.m. The first Mondays will be at 7:30 a.m. And we'll put a permanent sign up on the door of the Beaver Room saying when the coffees with council are, and we'll do a sign up sheet for the year.
Perfect. Nigel.
And we will skip August and likely late December.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Stephanie?
Just a clarification, did I hear also reserving the Beaver Room?
Yes.
So I want to make sure that's clear direction and Jen. Okay, thank you.
Right. Okay. Anything else? All right. Well, we finished the agenda. Thank you, as always. My only comment about this meeting, I always love coming to work with you for so many reasons. This one was the lowest energy meeting I've been in for a long time. And you always, for me, I always go, how'd it go? Because I always want it to be great. And I try to do my part, and I know you do too. I'm just wondering about the veracity of a Friday night meeting. I'm just wondering, I just leave it at, I don't know, but just saying. But beyond that, I want to thank you for your participation. Really thank staff for the preparation that they've done, as they always do. It's a great team. It's wonderful seeing you all again. And it looks like late June, right? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And does the mayor need to adjourn the meeting?
Nigel?
It's adjourned.